Chapter 1558. It could be said that for the rest of the banquet, the only topic was to hate Xiaoyang. Of course, because of Zhang Xuani's example, many people could only look at Xiaoyang with hostility and did not dare to find trouble with him. Who asked Xiaoyang to be the #1 genius of Sky Sword Realm by Jian and a relative of the royal family? With such a lineup, if they were to find trouble with him, they would be the ones to suffer in the end. As for Yang Sen's identity, they gradually found out a little. Because of this, many people began to feel fearful and worried, and did not dare to act rashly. To many geniuses, it was important to make more friends and gain the recognition of the royal family of the realm of the gods. Although they could not gain the favor of the princess, if they could gain some benefits in the realm of the gods, it would be immeasurable for their future. The realm of the gods was very powerful, but they would not isolate themselves. They were also very willing to accept geniuses from various worlds. Because of this, the realm of the gods gathered most of the geniuses from the 3,000 worlds, which was why they could maintain their peak and power forever. When Xiaoyang felt that he had eaten his fill and could no longer continue eating, he asked Yang Sen to bring him out of the place. Bai Jian felt that a few of his friends needed to drink a few cups, so he did not leave with them. On the way, there would occasionally be traces of spiritual energy leaking out from Xiaoyang's body. This was caused by him deliberately controlling it. If he did not control it at all, the leaked energy would be enough to destroy the objects around him one by one. Looking at the broken floor and some flowers and grass, Yang Sen frowned slightly. At the same time, his face revealed a trace of joy. "I didn't expect you to break through at this juncture," Yang Sen said, and felt that it was a little small. Originally, Xiaoyang refused to participate in the feast. He did not expect that it would become an opportunity after he came. It could be said that this was something that Xiaoyang did not expect. He had been eating and drinking crazily in the jade pool, causing the energy in his body to accumulate to the peak, and it was enough to overflow. However, Princess Mingzhu gave him a very strange feeling. Instead, it was that moment of tranquility that made Xiaoyang's state of mind much clearer. Instead, such an opportunity had appeared. It was also because of this reason that Xiaoyang was in a hurry to leave. After all, it wouldn't be good if he forced a breakthrough in the Jade Lake. Moreover, he didn't want more people to know that he was about to break through. Yang Sen's heart involuntarily shuddered as he looked at the shattered jade bricks. With such a loss, it was likely that his salary of a few years would go down the drain. At the same time, Yang Sen also felt that this was very strange. After breaking through to King Wu rank 8, why would Xiaoyang show off so much that he couldn't even suppress his own aura? It could be said that this kind of appearance would only appear at the early stage of the 9th order. However, Xiaoyang, who was about to reach the 8th rank, showed such signs. Too many questions appeared in Yang Sen's mind, causing him to be unable to think of a reasonable explanation for a moment. His mood became heavier as a result. In the end, Yang Sen could only attribute this matter to Xiaoyang drinking too much God's wine and eating heavenly treasures, causing the spiritual energy in his body to be too large and difficult to control. The two walked very quickly and soon arrived at the exit of the palace. The 2 rows of silver-armored guards were also standing neatly. When they saw Yang Sen supporting a person who was about the same age as him out, they were very puzzled. Everyone knew that the person Yang Sen brought along was Xiaoyang, but now he was being supported out. Could it be that the outsider was careless enough to offend someone and was beaten up? Some people who were originally angry with Xiaoyang also felt satisfied. Who asked you to speak arrogantly? Now you're getting your retribution. Young Master Yang Sen, the banquet isn't over yet. Are you leaving now? A guard stood out at this time and asked with a smile. Yang Sen waved his hand indifferently and said, "There are some things that need to be dealt with." Many people smiled but didn't say anything. This was just an excuse. Presumably, Xiaoyang was beaten out. Xiaoyang naturally felt the gazes of these silver-armored guards, but he didn't feel anything in his heart. After all, How to quickly and secretly break through was the most important thing right now. Moreover, the spiritual energy in Xiao Yang's body was almost unable to be suppressed. If he didn't start now, then that power would really be out of control. Yang Sen also knew that the current situation was very critical, so he didn't dare to have too many thoughts. After responding calmly, he directly supported Xiao Yang out of the palace. After Yang Sen left the imperial palace, a horse carriage quickly drove over. "Young master, what's the situation?" the servant asked anxiously. Yang Sen just shouted coldly, "Quickly return to the palace." After saying that, Yang Sen directly helped Xiao Yang into the carriage. The servant was also at a loss, but since the master had said so, he only needed to do so and it would be over. Watching the carriage gradually leave, some of the silver-armored guards also laughed. "Previously, I heard that Xiao Yang was determined to get our princess, wasn't he? Haha, it's fine if he bragged outside, but he actually dared to come personally. Look, the banquet has just started and he's already so badly injured that he needs to be supported out. Yes, I don't know what the palace is thinking. How could they help such an arrogant person?" They all knew about Shen Wushuang and Shen Yangshuan from the palace. These two were also born in the military and were very powerful. Moreover, they were unanimously recognized by them. If it weren't for Yang Sen, they would probably have laughed at them directly instead of behind their backs and sneakily. However, just as they were talking, they saw Yang Sen suddenly come out of the carriage and hover in midair. His hands were also constantly moving as if he was forming hand seals. Instantly, the 2 rows of silver-armored guards became much more nervous. Could it be that Yang Sen and Xiao Yang had a falling out and were going to fight? This was a place where the palace could see. Fighting like this could be said to have broken the rules. Yang Sen was also a commander. Could it be that he didn't know the rules? Even if he had misjudged the person, he had to endure it. This was not the place to fight. Boom! In the next moment, the carriage directly exploded. The dragon horse also seemed to be frightened and was about to run away, but it was forcibly pulled back by Yang Sen. Chapter 1559. They saw the dragon horse neighing, but they couldn't hear the slightest sound. The exploding wood shavings were also blocked by a layer of light and turned into ashes, no longer existing. Soon, they understood that Yang Sen used a formation to block it. That was why there wasn't any sound, and that was why such a situation occurred. However, the development of the situation now made them a little confused. They didn't know what was going on. Then, they saw the smoke gradually dissipating. Xiao Yang, who was sitting in the air, stood up from his original cross-legged position. He seemed to be very relaxed. The painful expression on his face was gone. Instead, there was a brazen feeling. At this time, Yang Sen also handed the frightened dragon horse to a servant and said, "Take the horse back. When the time comes, just tell the housekeeper that I didn't control my aura well and destroyed it." The servant naturally didn't dare to disobey Yang Sen's orders. He quickly nodded and led the dragon horse away. Xiao Yang and Yang Sen also walked side by side. Both of their faces revealed a trace of a satisfied smile. Now, the worry in Yang Sen's heart had completely dissipated. When he met Bai Jian, he found out that Xiao Yang's realm had regressed. This could be said to be a great inner demon for every cultivator. Now that Xiao Yang was able to overcome the inner demon and successfully break through, his future path would naturally be much smoother. Of course, in the eyes of the divine realm, King Wu's advancement from rank 8 to rank 9 was also a huge chasm. However, now that Xiao Yang had at least walked out of the deep mud, he could have the opportunity to cross that chasm. Now that he thought about it, Xiao Yang's aura leaked out probably because he had accumulated too much during this period of time, which led to such a situation. This time, thank you very much. Xiao Yang also said with a smile. Yang Sen shook his head indifferently and said, "I was just acting according to Big Brother's wishes. Of course, you are also worthy of being a friend." At the same time, An inexplicable thought appeared in Yang Sun's mind. He was very eager to spar with Xiaoyang. Although they had a competition before, it was an unfair battle. At that time, Xiaoyang had not yet reached King Wu's rank 8. Soon, Yang Sun suppressed his thoughts. He had been in King Wu's rank 8 for several years, while Xiaoyang had just broken through. The gap between them was still in terms of time. At the mention of Shen Wushuang, Xiaoyang also felt a little emotional. Several years had passed, and he didn't even appear at the Jade Lake banquet. No one knew how long he had been in seclusion. On top of the city wall, a man and a woman stood side by side, watching the two youths advance. The divine realm's Yang Sun, the divine realm of the divine realm. Of course, of Devsti, of course, of course, of course, of TSS of Dove, S, of his, of his is as of his, S. That's the only way to prove to your father that he's worthy of entering the divine realm. The divine realm's Yang Sun smiled and shook her head. Do you think so highly of him? The divine realm's Yang Sun asked. The man nodded and said, Not only do I think highly of him, but I also think that he'll take you down. As he spoke, the divine realm's Yang Sun became indecent. The divine realm's Yang Sun immediately clenched her fists, and her voice became much more serious. She said, It seems that you think that I'm no match for you just because you've improved your abilities. Why don't we spar now? No. The divine realm's Yang Sun immediately begged for mercy. He then muttered, You're so violent. It'll be difficult for you to get married in the future. What did you say? The divine realm's Yang Sun said each word slowly. There was an eerie and terrifying feeling to it. The divine realm's Yang Sun aura was reduced without a trace. Even his legs were trembling. After returning to the King's mansion, Xiaoyang continued to shut himself in the cultivation room and went into seclusion. Although Xiaoyang had broken through to King Wu rank 8, his foundation was not completely stable yet. Moreover, he needed to make a name for himself in the God Realm tournament. Therefore, he needed to perfect himself as soon as possible. However, Xiaoyang was not as nervous as before. Instead, he continued to ponder over the inheritance that the divine realm's true lord had left for him. Although the true lord's final level was only the peak of King Wu rank 9, the true lord's comprehension of bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind was enough to move many people and make them see him in a new light. The true lord had comprehended for more than 10,000 years. How could Xiaoyang digest it all in such a short period of time? Of course, he was not in a hurry at all. Every meal had to be taken one bite at a time. Time passed slowly, and the God Realm tournament had begun. However, Xiaoyang did not need to participate in the initial selection because he had used unrivaled God's privilege. The great competition of the Divine Realm could be said to be the grandest event in the Divine Realm. Countless young talents also yearned to display their elegance in this great competition, hoping to be valued and selected, and from then on change their destiny. Since Yang Sun had arranged everything for him in the God Realm, Xiaoyang did not mind at all. Naturally, someone would come to inform him when the time was up. At this moment, Xiaoyang was holding the silver lightning thunder spear in one hand and a silent thunder pearl in his other hand. Soon after, Xiaoyang let out a low roar and forcefully pressed the silent thunder pearl in his hand onto the silver lightning spear without any hesitation. Suddenly, the two forces of thunder and lightning seemed to be secretly competing with each other. They attacked each other continuously, as if both parties wanted to break through or even destroy each other. It could be said that the attributes of the two magic treasures were the same. However, it was also because of this that there was a huge repulsion between them. Even so, Xiaoyang did not give up at all. He continued to merge them forcefully. Even though his arms were numb from the power of the lightning, he didn't feel the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he became even more cautious. However, Xiaoyang had to use more power to get his hands closer to each other. It was even very strenuous, and he was almost losing control. However, Xiaoyang did not give up. Instead, he frantically extracted his own power. He even summoned Xiao Hu to help him fuse the two Dharma artifacts together. After a long time, with Xiao Hu's help, he finally embedded the Silent Thunder Pearl on the silver lightning thunder spear. Looking at the Silent Thunder Pearl, Xiaoyang smiled in satisfaction. Chapter 1560. Xiaoyang knew about this kind of fusion method before, but Xiaoyang wasn't very clear about how to operate it. However, Xiaoyang also found such a method in the inheritance of the Supreme. He first thought that the silver lightning spear and Silent Thunder Pearl had the same attribute, so he did it immediately. He didn't expect it to succeed. Because the silver lightning spear was fused with a Silent Thunder Pearl, its power increased by a lot. It even directly jumped by one level. If the remaining two Silent Thunder Pearls were embedded together, the silver lightning spear would probably become even more powerful. However, Xiaoyang wasn't that anxious. He still needed the Silent Thunder Pearl to train his body, so he wasn't in a hurry to embed all of them. Soon after, Xiaoyang also kept the silver lightning spear. He looked at Xiao Hua, who was constantly jumping in front of him, and his heart was greatly shocked. In these few years, Xiao Hua had also swallowed the black fire until only 1/5 of its original body was left. And Xiao Hua's strength had also increased to a terrifying level. Now, an ordinary King Wu would probably find it difficult to fight against Xiao Hua. Perhaps even a level 9 could try to wrestle with it. I didn't expect Xiao Hua to grow faster than me. As Xiaoyang said, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Xiao Hua's strength was getting stronger, which was a good thing for him. This way, he would really have a card up his sleeve for the Realm of Gods tournament. With the power-up pill and the help of Xiao Hua, even if King Wu was a level 9 existence, Xiaoyang felt that he could take a few moves. Of course, the difference between King Wu's level 9 and level 8 could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. Even though the power-up pill was mysterious, it still couldn't truly possess the power of a level 9. You continue to swallow the black fire. I'll call you if I need you. As Xiaoyang said, he also made a hand seal and kept Xiao Hua. Now, Xiaoyang's heart was filled with anticipation. If Xiao Hua completely absorbed the black fire, how strong would it become? However, this was just a thought, and it was hard to be sure. Of course, Xiaoyang summoned Xiao Hua to help this time, because he wanted to see if Xiao Hua was affected by the black fire. Now, it seemed that there was no effect at all. That was a good thing. Feeling a little bored, Xiaoyang got up and stretched his body. Soon after, he walked out of the training room and sat down in the courtyard. One had to admit that Unrivaled God's taste was not bad. The flowers and plants in his courtyard looked very pleasing to the eye and did not give off the impression that he was deliberately trying to show off his extravagance. After a while, Xiaoyang saw a middle-aged scholar walking over slowly. When the scholar saw Xiaoyang, his brows furrowed for a moment before relaxing. Looking at the scholar, Xiaoyang muttered in his heart, "Who is this person?" But to be able to walk so calmly in the prince's residence, he definitely wasn't a simple person. It could even be said that, in God's capital, who didn't have a background and status, even a lowly maidservant was at King Wu's level. After leaving God's capital and going to other places, she would definitely be a person of high status. It could be said that only God's capital had such a special place. It was also because of this that God's capital was created as one of a kind. The scholar did not stand on ceremony at all. He walked straight to Xiaoyang and sat down opposite him. Everything seemed casual and natural, as if he was very familiar with the place. On the other hand, Xiaoyang felt a great deal of pressure. Although the scholar in front of him looked very friendly, there was no telling what he was thinking. "You are Xiaoyang." The scholar opened his mouth and asked. Xiaoyang nodded slightly when he heard that. He said, "May I know your name, sir?" The scholar sized up Xiaoyang with a very complicated expression in his eyes. It was as if there were too many things that he couldn't explain clearly. I am the owner of this residence, the scholar said casually as if he didn't care about it at all. Hearing this, Xiaoyang was especially shocked. The owner of this residence was the king of the gods' realm. Junior Xiaoyang greets the king. Xiaoyang immediately stood up and cupped his hands. The king looked at this young fellow. His manners were decent, but there was no trace of fear or weakness. He was also not overbearing. He had a very good grasp of this. Shortly after, the king waved his hand and gestured for Xiaoyang to sit down. I only came out of seclusion a few days ago. I heard that my son gave his spot in the competition to you. The king said as if he didn't mean it. However, this made people feel like they were denouncing him. Xiaoyang immediately felt a lot of pressure. Seeing that Xiaoyang didn't say a word, the king smiled indifferently. If I had come out of seclusion earlier, I would have thrown you out of the gods' realm. However, what's done is done. The competition has already progressed to this stage. I can't change anything. I can only go along with Wu Shuang and do you a favor at no cost. As a father, how could he be happy after knowing what his son had done? However, what was done was done. It was impossible to change anything. Moreover, Shen Wushuang was in seclusion. If he were to force him out, the consequences would be severe. For a moment, Xiaoyang's heart was filled with discomfort. He had nothing to say in the face of such an accusation. Shen Wushuang had gone into seclusion. It could be said that Xiaoyang had no chance to bargain at all. He had no choice but to silently accept such enthusiasm. The king tapped his finger lightly on the stone table and said in a low voice, "No matter what, benefits are important. I hope that Wu Shuang has good taste. He staked everything on a single throw to give you a way out. What you do in the future will be worthy of his painstaking efforts." Since things had already come to this, he could only find another way out. In the king's opinion, Shan Wushuang had made such a choice because Xiaoyang had great potential for growth. He could become a capable assistant in the future. Senior Wu Shuang and I are brothers and friends. We're not master and servant. I cherish this relationship very much. If Wu Shuang needs anything in the future, I naturally won't refuse. However, it's impossible for me to be treated like a servant, Xiaoyang said very seriously. Although the king didn't explicitly state that Xiaoyang was a servant, his tone revealed that he was. This made Xiaoyang very unhappy. Even if the king was sitting across from him, he had to express his opinion instead of being a yes man. Chapter 1561. If the friendship between friends turned into a master-servant relationship, Xiaoyang would not be able to accept such kindness with a clear conscience. Moreover, he was not begging unrivaled God for help. As he said, he cherished this relationship very much. However, that did not mean that he had to put himself in the lowest position. The king's expression turned slightly angry when he heard this. It was as if he was very dissatisfied with Xiaoyang's answer. He could not calm himself down for a moment, and there was a strange look in his eyes. Xiaoyang stood there without moving in the face of the king's purposeful suppression. The pressure grew stronger, but he did not even frown. He stood there resolutely. Even though the jade bricks under Xiaoyang's feet began to crack like a spider web, Xiaoyang did not blink. He even felt the immense pressure inside his body. The king continued to look at this arrogant young man who did not know his place. Even now, he was still very stubborn. He did not expect him to have no intention of bowing down under such suppression. "Haha, Unrivaled was right about you." The king stood up as he spoke. Instantly, the pressure on Xiaoyang's body dissipated, and he felt a lot more relaxed. He found it difficult to bear the suppression of a rank 9 master. The king began to admire Xiaoyang now. He was neither servile nor overbearing in the face of power and influence. He would not easily let go of his bottom line. It was usually people like this who had their own bottom line. No matter how great their achievements were in the future, they would always help their friends. "I'm just testing you. I'm sure you don't mind," the king said with a smile. Xiaoyang said, "I mind very much." After all, no matter what kind of friendship it is, it can't stand the test. The king was stunned when he heard this. Then he remembered what his father had said. Some feelings were better used the more they were used. For a moment, even the king had an illusion in his heart. Could it be that he had made a mistake in looking for Xiaoyang today? But what was done could not be undone. What was the use of regretting? Moreover, if Xiaoyang was really such a petty person, then Wu Shuang was really blind. You can think whatever you want, but the final round of the great competition of the realm of the gods is about to begin. On the other hand, King Da acted as if nothing had happened just now. Instead, he looked calm and collected. At this time, Yang Sun, who was wearing a white robe, also hurriedly ran in. When he saw the back of the figure, he was immediately stunned. The thing that he was most worried about still happened. What? You don't recognize me after not seeing me for 10 years? Although the king didn't turn around, he could tell who it was from the footsteps. Yang Sun also braced himself and walked in front of King Da. He bowed and said, "Father." The king looked at his second son and nodded with a satisfied smile. Compared to 10 years ago, Yang Sun's cultivation had improved a lot. Where is Ying-er? She should also participate in this great competition of the god realm. The king said. Yang Sun replied in a low voice, "Little sister is accompanying Princess Mingzhu in the palace. Therefore, she is not traveling with us." The king only shook his head helplessly, as if he was regretting something. Shortly after, the king glanced at Xiaoyang, then looked at Yang Sun and said, "I still have some matters to take care of. Sun, take good care of the guest. Do not forget the etiquette of the realm of the gods." After saying that, the king stood up and left. "Farewell, father," Yang Sun said. Hearing this, the king stood where he was and said in a bad tone, "Etiquette is only for outsiders to see. Between us, father and son, there is no need to be distant." Yang Sun watched his father leave as a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Shortly after, Yang Sun turned his head and looked at Xiaoyang's feet. The cracks that were like spider webs were enough to explain a lot of problems. "My father has high expectations for my big brother, so it is unavoidable that he could not control his emotions. I hope brother Xiao will not take offense," Yang Sun said very helplessly. After Yang Sun came out of closed-door cultivation, he found out that his father had come out of closed-door cultivation. He rushed over as soon as he could, but he did not expect his father to be one step ahead of him. Xiaoyang waved his hand nonchalantly. As a father, it would be problematic if he looked on coldly from the sidelines. However, it was normal for him to vent his emotions at the moment. The king's title was not just for show. Although he was furious, he was able to control himself well and prioritize the big picture. "Has Wu Shuang not come out of closed-door cultivation yet?" Xiaoyang asked with some anticipation. Whether Wu Shuang came out of closed-door cultivation or not also indicated whether he could enter the tomb of the gods. Therefore, on this point, Xiaoyang was also quite anxious to find out. Yang Sun shook his head helplessly. To a cultivator in the realm of the gods, breaking through from rank 8 to rank 9 was like a heaven and earth gate. How could it be so easy? Among the younger generation in the realm of the gods, rank 8 King Wu could be found everywhere. However, Princess Mingzhu was the only one who could break through to rank 9. It was obvious how difficult it was to break through to King Wu rank 9. Although this was also within Xiaoyang's expectations, he still felt a strong sense of disappointment when he heard the news. Perhaps Wu Shuang could come out of closed-door cultivation in time, which could also reduce Xiaoyang's sense of self-blame. It's getting late. The second round of the realm of the gods is about to begin. "Let's go over first," Yang Sun said solemnly. Xiaoyang nodded and followed Yang Sun out of the king's residence. They took a carriage and headed to the assessment site of the second round of the realm of the gods. The realm of the gods had always been divided into 3 stages. The first stage was the selection among the various states in the realm of the gods. As for how the selection was carried out, it was up to each place to decide. As Xiaoyang had obtained Xin Wushuang's special privilege, he could directly skip the first round. The questions for the second round had always been set by God Capital. As for how the assessment would be carried out, there were different tricks each time. Therefore, it was very difficult to guess. Of course, the second round was not completely untraceable. The assessment would be carried out in secret zones. At the end of the second round, those who passed the assessment would be qualified to enter the tomb of the god of sin. Therefore, the second round of assessment was especially important. It was related to whether or not one could enter the tomb of the god of sin. It was also because of this that many people were not interested in participating in the third round of assessment. After all, it was enough to be able to enter the tomb of the god of sin. That was the highlight, the place that every cultivator yearned for. Therefore, compared to the third round, the second round of assessment was even more brutal and intense. Chapter 1562. Many of them felt that they had no chance of winning the third round and gave up. They began to focus on entering the tomb of the god of sin. Therefore, there were fewer people participating in the third round. But at the same time, if those who participated in the third round won, they would also be able to obtain more generous rewards. Every year, the treasures and skills that were given out were very generous. Of course, these were prepared for those who could win. In the past, many people had used too much strength to enter the third round, resulting in a bad state after entering the tomb of the gods. Xiaoyang had also obtained quite a lot of information about the Divine World Grand Tournament from Yongsun. Although a portion of the participants would forfeit, those who were able to remain were not to be underestimated. Therefore, every battle was very difficult. Therefore, it was not easy to reach the end and seize the championship. Yongsun even told Xiaoyang to try his best to win the second round. As for the third round, he could continue. However, if he really met a strong opponent, it was best to give up. After all, if his injuries were too serious, he would not be able to enter the tomb of the god of sin in his best condition. He might encounter more trouble. After all, there were many opportunities in the tomb of the god of sin. At the same time, there would be terrifying fights. At that time, if he left because he did not have enough strength, it would be a lifelong regret. This time, they went to the west city of the fairies' capital. Therefore, there were more people who passed the first round. There are more than 200 people from the gods' world who passed the first round of assessment. In addition to some special privileges in the holy capital and some genius disciples from the other 9 realms, there are more than 300 people in total. Yang Xin couldn't help but sigh as he spoke. Among the 300 people, every one of them was King Wu rank 8. They were all geniuses from various places. Naturally, their strength was not to be doubted. Xiaoyang heard and did not mind. If it was before, he might have thought that this would be a very strenuous task. However, now that he had stepped into King Wu rank 8, his strength had increased tremendously. Therefore, he was not afraid. If it was really impossible he could summon Xiaohua, then he would definitely be able to pass the second round. You have the explosion pill, so I think it shouldn't be a problem for you to forcefully pass the second round of the test. However, there were too many uncertainties in the second round. Therefore, it's best that we stick together. Only in this way will we have a greater chance of safely passing through. Yang Sun continued. The second round of the test had always been the same. They had to survive in a small world and obtain some tokens to pass the test. Moreover, there are only 64 spots. In other words, each person needs to defeat 5 to 6 enemies in order to stabilize their position, Yang Sun continued. During this period of time, Xiaoyang had always been in seclusion in the cultivation room. He didn't know anything about the realm of the gods. Therefore, Yang Sun was instructed by his big brother to do his best to tell Xiaoyang about the situation. Of course, it was better to explain the situation clearly to avoid any accidents. When Xiaoyang heard this, he smiled faintly and said, "Since we are going to form a group, it sounds more like a competition between several factions." These words caused Yang Sun to frown slightly. It could be said that Xiaoyang's words hit the nail on the head. He also nodded, slightly in agreement. As the second round of the test required them to stick together, the easiest way to form a team was to be from the same force. The trust between them was naturally very high. Moreover, after passing the test, they would be able to enter the tomb of the gods. If they weren't so unlucky, they would be able to obtain some benefits in the tomb of the gods and increase their strength greatly. With the increase in strength, they would be able to feed back to the original force. The two could be said to complement each other. Although the realm of the gods was controlled by the royal family, there were also a few different forces that banded together. What they wanted was nothing more than greater benefits and a bigger slice of the cake. However, these temptations were also very fatal. Although there were no wars in the realm of the gods, it was also very peaceful. It was also because of these reasons that many people's desire for power grew even greater. On the contrary, many people didn't value cultivation as much. Anyway, level 8 King Wu could be found everywhere in Fairy's capital. However, power and status were different. As for those who continued to advance, at most, they could only reach the 9th level Martial King realm. However, those who could reach this level were only 1 in 100, or even 1 in 1,000. Going further, that kind of realm was like a rumor. How many people could achieve it? Even people in the realm of the gods weren't sure if anyone in the realm of the gods had really reached that realm. Therefore, it was also a mystery. Almost no one could achieve it. Who would have the luxury to hope for it? Perhaps it was also because of this reason that people in the realm of the gods began to pay attention to power instead. Cultivation of the realm was secondary. It was as if they were neglecting the essentials and focusing on the trifles. Of course, that was also because many people had no choice but to compromise and recognize the reality. Right now, the realm of the gods looks incomparably powerful. However, in terms of cultivation, it can be said to be a stagnant pool. Many people after reaching level 8 King Wu become unfamiliar with cultivation and begin to pay attention to power and status. However, this is also good. We have always had almighty people in the royal family. Our status is unshakable, Yang Sun said and smiled helplessly. When Xiaoyang heard this, he also helplessly let out a bitter laugh. It could be said that the current realm of the gods was completely fixed. They had lost the heart to cultivate, which was why they were like this. Of course, this was also caused by the absence of danger. The realm of the gods could be said to be the strongest existence in the 3,000 worlds. Its status was unshakable. In the end, it's because the current days are too comfortable. The conditions are too good, Yang Sun said sadly. For a cultivator to gradually give up on cultivation in the realm of the martial Tao, if that wasn't sad, then what was? It could be said that the realm of the gods was blessed by the heavens. However, it was also because of this that many people were proud and satisfied and began to be content with the status quo. In the realm of the gods, there were countless level 8 King Wu. Looking at the other small worlds, who could have such strength? In this way, the strongest was unshakable. Looks like Big Brother didn't misjudge you. Your eyesight is very sharp, Yang Sun also said sincerely. Although Xiaoyang had been in the realm of the gods for more than 2 years, he had almost never stepped out of the house. He didn't pay attention to the happenings, but he could see clearly. Chapter 1563. Now, Yang Sun admired Xiaoyang even more from the bottom of his heart. Not only was Xiaoyang powerful, but he was also very insightful when it came to looking at things. He could see many things that others could not. As for the reason why he didn't care about many things, it was probably because he had seen through too much, which was why he was like this. In that case, how many people are there in our faction? Xiaoyang asked with a helpless smile. Yang Sun could only shake his head helplessly when he heard that. He said, "Of course we royalty have to stick together. However, if it's because of you, I'm afraid it's just you and me. As for whether my sister will be with the other siblings or something else, I'm not sure. Logically speaking, with Yang Sun's status, it was only natural for him to be with the royalty. However, Xiaoyang did not have any friends. If he was alone, it would be very difficult for him to pass the second round. Of course, Yang Sun was also gambling with his future. If he failed, that a prince's residence would probably suffer a crushing defeat. However, he thought that it would be good if his sister could enter. From Yang Sun's tone, Xiaoyang could gather a lot of information. If it's difficult for you, you don't have to worry about me. Just go with your siblings. As for me, I'll definitely enter the second round, Xiaoyang said very firmly. Xiaoyang, who could see things clearly, naturally knew what was going on. It was probably because unrivaled God said that he was determined to win Princess Mingzhu that many people would target him. Even some of the royalty hated him and did not want to play with him. Wasn't that normal? Regarding this, Xiaoyang could see it clearly. However, with Yang Sun in the middle, it would be a very bad thing. If anything happened, Yang Sun would be in a difficult position. When that happened, his future in the God realm would probably be ruined. Yang Sun waved his hand nonchalantly and said, "It's okay. Since Big Brother has entrusted you to me, I'll naturally be with you until the end, no matter if it's a success or failure." Yang Sun was very determined when he said this, because it was a promise. No matter what, he had to keep it. As for whether he would succeed or fail in the end, that would be another matter altogether. Perhaps Yang Sun would regret it for the rest of his life if he didn't obtain the qualifications to enter the divine tomb. But if he didn't do what he promised, he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Xiaoyang looked at the young man in front of him and smiled for some reason. The three brothers from the prince's residence were truly different. There didn't seem to be any arrogance in them. Instead, they valued their promises very much. Suddenly, he thought of that middle-aged scholar. Even after knowing the whole story, he didn't really do anything. He only gave some warning. Not long after, Xiaoyang followed Yang Sun to the west side of the city. After getting off the carriage, it was only noon. After alighting from the carriage, Xiaoyang also saw a huge palace. Of course, the palaces here were different from the imperial palaces. It was a palace-like structure that was dozens of feet tall. It was like a sharp sword that pierced through the clouds. Looking up, Xiaoyang saw a plaque with the words, "West Divine Palace," written on it. On both sides, there were many people entering one after another. Many of them were talking and laughing. They seemed to be very happy. Being able to make it to the second round of the realm of the gods was enough to prove one's strength. Regardless of whether one succeeded or not, the treatment one would receive after returning would naturally be different. If one was lucky enough to make it through the second round, then it would be like a carp leaping over the dragon's gate. From then on, one would soar into the sky. Therefore, in this current situation, how could they not be excited and unhappy? The West Divine Palace was also very huge. It was just that the name was a little strange. Although Yang Sun saw that Xiaoyang was a little confused, he didn't explain anything. Back then, he had also asked his father why this place was called the Western Divine Temple. His father, King Da, had only smiled and said nothing. He had not explained anything. Looking at the people coming and going, looking up, almost all of them were King Wu rank 8 existences. It was very terrifying. Moreover, these were the best of the best among King Wu rank 8 existences. It was impossible for them to be lucky enough to sneak in. So, everyone's strength was very tyrannical. Moreover, they were also very experienced in battle. If there was really any luck, then among the privileges given by the royal family, there might be some who were just there to make up the numbers. However, the possibility of this was very small. After all, this was related to the rise and fall of the royal family. Who would dare to mess around? Go in and wait. Yang Sun said softly. Xiaoyang nodded and followed Yang Sun in. Hey, isn't that Yang Sun? I heard that the person he brought along is Xiaoyang. Back then, the weakest person to participate in the banquet was King Wu rank 7. It's him. During the banquet, he didn't even dare to speak when he was questioned. I don't know why Bai Jian supported him. That's how he avoided disaster. He's really not a man. He dares to say such wishful thinking, but he's so cowardly when he does things. These people just want to use their arrogant words to attract attention so that they can reap benefits. Who knew that our brother Shin Wushuang from the God realm would fall for it? For a moment, many people began to discuss among themselves when they saw Xiaoyang. Many harsh words flowed out of their mouths. There were even words that were even more outrageous. Yang Sun could not bear to listen to them. He wanted to fly into a rage, but was held back by Xiaoyang. After all, it was meaningless to stir up trouble at this time. Instead, if things got out of hand and they lost the right to participate in the second round of the assessment, the loss would outweigh the gain. Look, he doesn't even dare to get angry after hearing these words. You can imagine what he's like. How dare a coward show up in the God realm? What a joke. I don't know what Shin Wushuang is thinking. He actually gave up his position. It seems that their friendship is not ordinary. Yang Sen was almost unable to restrain his anger. However, he was firmly held down by Xiaoyang's strong hand. Xiaoyang also gave Yang Sen a look, indicating that there was no point in erupting now. Moreover, if he wanted to shut these people's mouths, it was not as simple as shouting a few words. Next, Xiaoyang's gaze quickly swept across the faces of those people. If he had the chance to meet these people in the second round of the assessment, he would have to treat them well. At this moment, Yang Sen was also very surprised. Although he did not unleash his full strength, he was still suppressed in the state. Chapter 1564. Just how much strength was needed to suppress him? This point caused Yang Sen to mutter in his heart. However, he was sure that Xiaoyang's strength had increased greatly after he stepped into King Wu's rank 8. Otherwise, how could he have such great strength? When he thought of this, Yang Sen felt a little better in his heart. He then looked at Xiaoyang's calm and collected appearance. How good was his mental fortitude to be able to completely ignore all these filthy words and not affect his emotions. Soon, Yang Sun and Xiaoyang entered the Western Divine Temple and settled down in one of the corners. However, the people here were very repulsed by Xiaoyang. No one was willing to come close to them. Instead, they could keep a distance. However, their mouths were not idle, and they continued to talk. At this time, Xiaoyang also began to observe the situation in the Western Divine Temple. It was a very spacious place, but in the center, there was a statue of a god. The statue of a god was a little out of place with the layout of the realm of the gods. The statue of a god looked very simple and did not use a single bit of gold leaf or jade. It seemed to be made of simple clay. To be able to place a statue of a god in such a large place, and to be the only one of its kind, the statue of a god must have a great background. Otherwise, how could it be able to obtain such a large territory in this precious land? More than 10 feet in front of the realm of the gods, there was a stone platform with a map on it. It was about 8 feet wide and 10 feet long. As it was not time yet, they could only wait quietly. Looking up, although they had not entered the secret territory yet, the division of the forces was already incisively and vividly displayed. The people of a group or force were all standing together. However, because of Xiaoyang's appearance, the topic of some of the teams had also turned to him. After a while, a little girl also skipped over and said, "Second brother, you made me look for you." As the little girl said, she seemed a little angry. She put her hands on her hips, and her face looked round because of her anger. Xiaoyang also knew this little girl. She was Ziying, the one who called herself Big Sister. When he saw Ziying, Yang Sun's expression immediately became much more unsightly. He said, "Little sister, weren't you accompanying Princess Mingxu?" "Yes, but I came over when the second round of assessment started." Ziying seemed to have no idea what Yang Sun meant and said to herself. Yang Sun also felt a little hopeless. There were some things that couldn't be said openly, and there was no way to say it. Now that you've seen it, you can rest assured. Go back quickly, Yang Sun urged. Ziying shook her head. She blinked her big eyes and said strangely, "We are a family. Where do you want me to go?" These words caused Yang Sun to be in complete despair. This little sister of his, who didn't care about worldly affairs and had a young temperament, was really going to make him anxious to death. Looking at Yang Sun's awkward expression, Ziying did not look at him. Instead, her gaze fell on Xiaoyang. She mischievously said, "What's wrong? You don't know how to greet people after not seeing each other for a few days?" "Big sister, I saw you and brother catching up, so I didn't dare to disturb you," Xiaoyang said pretentiously. Hearing those words, Ziying smiled with satisfaction. She had a very satisfied appearance. Immediately after, Ziying walked up to Xiaoyang. She reached out her hand, but realized that she was being lightly touched. Xiaoyang immediately squatted down and let the little girl pat his shoulder. "You're a very sensible little brother. I'm very satisfied. In the second round of assessment, you'll be able to enter the tomb of the god of sin by watching me and my second brother's performance," Ziying said very happily. Hearing this, Yang Sun's heart was filled with helplessness. It was not that he did not acknowledge Ziying's strength. On the contrary, Ziying's talent was more powerful than his and unrivaled God's. She was recognized as the #1 pearl in the royal family, and she was the #2. However, Ziying was really too young and immature. Therefore, it was not a good thing for her to be separated from the rest of the group. Looking at this little girl now, it was obvious that she did not want to go back. Yang Sun knew his sister very well. Once she had decided on something, even his father could not change her mind, let alone him. Yang Sun held his forehead. It seemed like a tough battle was going to begin soon. "Then I'll have to thank Big Sister for your help," Xiaoyang said with a grin. In Xiaoyang's opinion, this little girl was indeed very interesting. After a while, an old man and a middle-aged man walked up to the statue. Silence. Immediately, everyone's eyes fell on the two of them. "I'm the Prime Minister of the God Realm, Jiang Zhangqing, under the orders of the Emperor God. I'm here to supervise the second round of assessment with the king," the old man said slowly. The king had a smile on his face, but his gaze was constantly wandering around the field, intentionally or unintentionally passing through various places. The God Realm Grand Tournament is a major event in the God Realm. We carry out the wishes of our ancestors to select talents for the heavenly Tao, Jiang Zhangqing said loudly. Soon after, Jiang Zhangqing began a long speech. What he said was nothing more than the reason for the God Realm Grand Tournament to be passed down and where his efforts were. This long speech made many impatient cultivators extremely anxious. On the contrary, this old man was still speaking in an unhurried tone. It even felt like he was about to fall asleep. On the other hand, Xiaoyang listened with great interest. It was because he did not know much about the God Realm that he was like this. The others had already memorized this information by heart. They could even recite it backwards. How could they find it fresh? At this moment, the one who was acting the most unnatural was Ziying. She looked like she was about to fall asleep. If she was given a bed, she might really fall asleep. Yang Sun's expression was still normal. Perhaps this was related to his personality. He had a high tolerance for these boring speeches. Time passed slowly, but Jiang Zhangqing didn't seem to feel thirsty at all. He was still talking tirelessly. The king's gaze was still wandering as if he had not stopped for a moment. Of course, he did not move at all. As for Xiaoyang, he only knew this through his perception. After all, the king's consciousness had passed by them a few times. After a long time, Jiang Zhangqing coughed and said, "The second round of the grand tournament will be held in the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map bestowed by the Emperor God." Once they heard the words competition, many people immediately woke up from their sleep. Their eyes became bright and full of expression. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Some people were even cursing, silently. The nonsense was finally over. Chapter 1565. Although everyone knows the rules, for the sake of safety, I have to repeat it again. This is also my duty. No matter how many people enter this 10 directions, 8 wasteland map to undergo the test, only 64 people can advance to the third round in the end. Jiang Zhangqing said loudly. When these words came out, no one made a move. That was because they did not dare to show it and could only endure it in their hearts. These items are called divine fire tokens. There are a total of 64 of them. After 10 days of the test, those who can hold this token can advance. If the divine fire on it is deliberately extinguished, it will be seen as against the rules. Of course, you all can forget about hiding the aura of this item. This was personally made by the Divine Emperor. With your ability, it is impossible to hide it. Therefore, don't try to be clever. Even if you all succeed, King Da and I will intervene, Jiang Zhangqing said. When these words came out, many people were immediately shocked. If this was the case, no matter who held the token, they would be exposed. At that time, it would definitely cause a crazy fight. Moreover, they had to persist for 10 days. This was not necessarily an easy thing. In such a selection, those who could advance in the end were tested by strength, temperament, and luck. Of course, intelligence was also included. It could be said that this was considered an all-round test. The talents that could be selected like this were naturally no small matter. The aura of this divine fire token is also extraordinary. I hope that everyone can sense this aura clearly to avoid missing it, Jiang Zhangqing said. When these words came out, everyone looked carefully, afraid of missing any detail. Xiaoyang was also sensing the aura inside. The aura of the fire elements was very obvious. At the same time, there was a very special power and imprint inside. It must have been personally made by the Divine Emperor. It was very difficult to sense clearly. However, this sort of influence was truly extraordinary. If this token enters the 10 directions 8 wasteland map, the aura will expand by 10 miles, Jiang Zhangqing said, and the other 63 tokens also appeared in his hand. After saying that, Jiang Zhangqing also threw them out, scattering them all into the 10 directions 8 wasteland map. Everyone's eyes were constantly moving around, looking very carefully. When the time came, they would enter that place to look for the tokens. After all, this was not a joke. How could they let down their guard? His aura expanded to a range of 10 miles, making it easier to find him. In this way, the fighting and snatching would become very intense when the time came. It would be impossible for them to play tricks. It could be said that this matter was almost completely set in a dead end. This time, let's focus on exchanging pointers. Don't kill. If you do, then don't blame me for being impolite. Jiang Zhangqing's voice became much colder at this moment. The God Realm had always valued peace and harmony, and the prerequisite for every test was to not kill anyone. Of course, these words were also a warning to all the cultivators here that if they had any sinister intentions, they would be courting death. This old man will say one last thing. Friends from the outside world, if you wish to join the Divine Realm, you'll have to work harder in this 10 directions 8 wasteland map, Jiang Zhangqing said with a smile. Immediately, the eyes of some of the outsiders lit up. If he could join the God Realm, that would be a great thing. However, after every grand competition of the God Realm, there were only a few people who were qualified to join the God Realm. King Wu was a rank 8, and the God Realm did not lack him. If you didn't have any unique characteristics, who would want to recruit you? Bow. After saying that, the 2 silver-armored guards handed 3 incense sticks to Jiang Zhangqing and Da Wang, respectively. After receiving it, the 2 of them bowed respectfully to the statue. The other cultivators did the same immediately. After Jiang Zhangqing and Da Wang inserted the incense sticks into the incense burner, they turned around and shouted, "Begin!" With this shout, many people turned into flowing lights and rushed into the 10 directions 8 wasteland map, disappearing. Xiao Yang and Yang Sun were not in a hurry as they watched the crowd rush in. Of course, there were many teams who were not in a hurry. If they rushed in now, it might not be a good thing. If there were too many opponents, it would lead to a huge consumption. At that time, it would be a huge problem whether they could hold on for 10 days. Therefore, it would not be too late to wait until the 10 days were up to take action after observing the situation from the outside and finding the weak spots to enter. Many people hesitated for a moment before entering the arena one after another. Those who entered now were all trying to get the divine fire token as soon as possible. However, even if they got it, it would not be easy to guard it for 10 days. Either the team's strength was strong enough, or there was something wrong with their brains. After a while, there were only a few dozen people left out of the 300. At this time, 7 people walked over. The person in the lead was very tall and valiant. "Ziying, are you not coming with us?" the tall man asked. Yang Sun frowned. The other party did not mention his name. Obviously, he was biased against Xiaoyang. Ziying shook her head like a rattledrum and said, "I want to go with second brother." The valiant man laughed disdainfully. He looked at Xiaoyang with a meaningful gaze. Although the other party did not reveal their identity, Xiaoyang knew that these 7 people were probably the royal family's team. Soon after, the 7 people looked at the 3 of them with strange gazes and entered the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. Soon after, the crowd entered one after another without any hesitation. De Wong watched from the side without saying a word, because in such a serious situation, if he spoke, it would be selfish and he would inevitably be criticized. Even if Blade Mountain Flame Sea Guild was anxious, he could only say nothing. There's no one in the northwest corner. The 3 of us will land there. After we meet up, we will plan how to seize the divine fire token, Yang Sun said calmly. From Yang Sun's point of view, there were only 3 of them. It would not be easy to seize the divine fire token. Therefore, they could only resort to trickery and wait for the right time. Okay. Xiaoyang nodded after taking a look. Soon after, Xiaoyang and the other 2 rushed into the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. However, the position that Xiaoyang chose was a little off. The distance between him, Yang Sun, and Ziying increased by a lot. Although they were in the same direction, the distance was a little far. Seeing Xiaoyang's whereabouts, De Wong also frowned slightly. There was some doubt in his expression. Chapter 1566. At this moment, the king had a lot of doubts in his heart. What was Xiaoyang thinking? Since they had agreed to meet at the same place, the king was now sitting in front of them. Did he want to fly alone, or was he worried that his 2 children would be isolated, so he did this? However, on second thought, this was not right. If Xiaoyang really thought that way, he would not be in the same position. At this moment, Jiang Zhangqing walked over as well. His originally serious expression had softened a lot. He said, "The king, these 3 children of yours are really worrisome." When De Wong heard this, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "I've been too stubborn all these years. I wanted to go further, but I neglected to teach them. This time they're still so willful," the king said, a little self-deprecating. Jiang Zhangqing still had a smile on his face, but it gave people the feeling that it was a fake smile. No one knew what he was thinking. "What's so special about this Xiaoyang that your son voluntarily gave up his seat, and the second son and daughter followed him?" Jiang Zhangqing asked. As for Xiaoyang, after his name had spread, he had gone to investigate him, but to no avail. His understanding of this person was also a mystery. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. Of course, in those remote and desolate small worlds, it was normal that they had not heard of him since he was not famous. However, for unrivaled God and his 2 brothers to do this, one would have to think carefully about the reason. However, the news that spread from the banquet confused Jiang Wenqing even more. Xiaoyang's level was really low. It was not enough to say that he was low-key, but he could only be described as weak. To be honest, my son is in charge of this, so I'm not sure. As for why he's doing this, I'm afraid he just wants to make friends, the king said calmly. Although the king had figured out some of his eldest son, unrivaled God's thoughts, he could not completely believe it because this was too big a gamble. However, at the same time, if the gamble was right, the rewards would be very high. As for success or failure, that would depend on fate and luck. Jiang Zhongqing realized that Dawang's mouth was too tight. He couldn't get anything out of him. He felt helpless. But in recent years, the king had indeed been in seclusion, not caring about worldly affairs. Even unrivaled God was in charge of most of the king's affairs. Now that Shen Wushuang had gone into closed-door cultivation, it was second young master Shenyang Xuan who was holding the fort. Kids these days are too bold. Maybe we're old and our eyes have become cloudy, Jiang Zhongqing said with a smile. King pointed at the 10 Directions 8 Wastelands map and said, "If it becomes murky, we won't be able to see what's happening in this map. If the Celestial Emperor blames us, we won't have a good ending." When Jiang Zhongqing heard this, he laughed out loud. Soon after, he and Dawang began to monitor everything that happened in the 10 Directions 8 Wastelands map. The 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map was very big. It could be said that it was much bigger than the space inside the airship. After Xiaoyang entered the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map, he observed it carefully. Although he couldn't see through everything at a glance, he had a rough estimate in his heart. It could be said that the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map and his magic treasure, the stately map, were similar in that they both formed a mysterious mini-world. However, the stately map was not on the same level as the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map. At the same time, Xiaoyang also thought that the stately map could be refined continuously. After all, it was just an incomplete part. It was just that he didn't have the ability to refine it all this time. That was why he hadn't paid attention to it. However, how to refine it was also a huge problem. Of course, Xiaoyang wasn't in a hurry. Obtaining the divine fire tokens was the most important thing at the moment. Xiaoyang was also on a hillside at the moment. Although finding the divine fire tokens was an urgent matter at the moment, he didn't look for them. Instead, he stood there. No matter how one looked at it, snatching the divine fire tokens now was a very unwise thing to do. Moreover, Xiaoyang also felt that the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map was very mysterious. He wanted to feel the mystery within it and see if it could give him some feeling that he could use to refine his own magic treasure. Soon, Xiaoyang also tried to integrate the stately map's mental cultivation method into the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map according to the stately map's mental cultivation method. Every trace of aura became very subtle in his perception, as if it was constantly passing by like a breeze. Gradually, Xiaoyang also felt the things around him. Whether it was the forest, the stream, or even a breeze, he could feel them clearly. Soon, he felt that there were 2 pairs of eyes constantly moving around. Occasionally, they would even sweep past the place he was looking at. Suddenly, Xiaoyang was startled. He knew that Jiang Zhongqing and Dawang were observing the changes inside to prevent anyone from going overboard and doing something that violated the rules. After knowing this, Xiaoyang also became a lot more cautious. He knew that if he was discovered, he would definitely not have a good ending. After all, he was just a person in the map. Now he wanted to examine the map and even peek at the mystery within. How could others agree to that? However, Xiaoyang couldn't suppress the curiosity in his heart. He wanted to know everything. Therefore, he especially restrained his aura and became very careful. Xiaoyang's consciousness could be said to be very powerful. Under his careful control, it was almost impossible to be discovered. Back then, in the mountain wheel world, the 3 giants were only a few feet away from him, but they couldn't discover him. Soon, his consciousness was constantly spread out. Xiaoyang also gradually saw the things within a radius of 10 miles around him clearly. During the process of perception, Xiaoyang's consciousness began to invade the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map. This approach was not only to understand, but also to control the changes in this side. However, Xiaoyang didn't dare to do this. If there were any changes, he was afraid that he would be discovered by the owner of this magic treasure. He just wanted to use this convenience to feel. If he really did something out of line, it might lead to more serious consequences. Moreover, how could others be indifferent after knowing that their magic treasure was invaded by someone else's consciousness? Very quickly, Xiaoyang had a clear view of this small corner. Chapter 1567. Xiaoyang's infiltration speed was also very fast. He also carefully avoided Jiang Zhangqing and De Wang's perception so that they did not notice him. After clearly perceiving this small corner in the northwest, Xiaoyang also saw that Yang Sen and Ziying had already met up. They were also constantly running in the northwest corner, obviously looking for Xiaoyang's location. The little girl looked very angry. She was obviously cursing and swearing. She looked very angry and unhappy. Xiaoyang was also a little playful, so he focused a little, wanting to know what this cute little girl was talking about. This Xiaoyang actually didn't act according to brother's instructions. We've been looking for him for so long, but we still haven't found him. Ziying said very unhappily. Yang Sen did not say anything, but his expression was very serious. However, the worry between his brows was also obvious. This was because he knew very well that even if Xiaoyang did not have the divine fire token with him, due to his previous reputation, he was probably in existence that would be targeted by the entire God realm. If he went alone and encountered cultivators from the God realm, then he was afraid that he would be in great trouble. When that happened, it would be almost impossible for him to even walk out of here in one piece, let alone fight for the divine fire token. Although killing was not allowed in this 10 directions, 8 wasteland map, there was no rule that said that people could not be disabled. As long as they were still breathing, then it was not considered murder. I'll definitely beat him up when I find him. He's really causing trouble for me, the big sister. I'm so angry. Ziying seemed to be very unhappy. She even made threatening gestures as she spoke, venting her emotions. Looking at this little girl, Xiaoyang was also amused. He even thought that it was a little funny. Of course, Xiaoyang was also very touched. He and Shan Wushuang had only met a few times and did not have much of a friendship. However, they treated him like this, which was really rare. Perhaps this was all because of Shan Wushuang. What more could one ask for with such a friend? However, just as Xiaoyang was secretly delighted, an ominous premonition suddenly surged in his heart. Humph! A middle-aged man in a white robe suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes immediately emitted rays of golden light, and a trace of anger appeared on his face. The man was sitting on a chair made of jade with a dragon carved on it. This jade stone was not simple. It was extremely rare in the 3,000 small worlds. It had the effect of calming one's mind and nourishing one's cultivation. Even if an ordinary person were to sit on this chair, it would not be a problem to prolong their lifespan. It could even transform their bones and give birth to spirit roots. The man was dressed in a plain robe, but it could not hide the disdainful aura emitted from his eyes. The dignified aura on his face made people want to submit to him. I didn't expect that there would be someone who has the guts to spy on the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. The man muttered. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. At this time, a very simple, dressed woman walked out. Although she did not wear any makeup, she was very beautiful. Although the woman was old, she had a noble aura. At the same time, she gave off a very amiable feeling. Husband, did you sense wrongly? Is it the Prime Minister and King Da? The woman said gently. The woman's voice was very soft, like a flowing stream. Hearing it was enough to calm one's heart. The man shook his head and said, Of course I can recognize their aura. That person is not even from the God realm. The woman's expression changed slightly when she heard this. A genius from the outside world? Could it be a disciple of the profound ice world who is good at this? The woman asked in surprise. The man shook his head and said, You won't believe it, even if I tell you. That person is in my 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. When I sensed him, I sensed that he was in the center. Then he disappeared completely and I couldn't find him. Could it be that my husband was so angry that he was annihilated? Is that why you couldn't find him? The woman asked in a low voice. The man still shook his head. After the golden light in his eyes dissipated, he was filled with doubt. The woman's face was also filled with doubt. She felt that there were not many people who could hide from her husband's eyes. Moreover, in the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map, there was only a group of King Wu rank 8 children. This person's consciousness is very strong. I'm afraid that he used some method to forcefully separate his consciousness from his body. That's why it's hard for husband to find him, the man said. Suddenly, the woman's expression changed slightly. It had to be said that the person who tested him was really ruthless. She wondered if he had the ability, like a gecko, to sacrifice his tail to survive. The woman waved her hand indifferently and said, "Then we only need to inform King Da and the Prime Minister. That person was hit by husband and his consciousness must be injured. It's not difficult for them to find him. If he's really a talent, it's also a good thing to be able to enter our God realm." Although the woman said it calmly, she was looking forward to it. After all, to be able to take a hit from the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map and still be able to deceive everyone, his talent wouldn't be bad. The man nodded slightly. Then he closed his eyes again and prepared to search for that person to see if he could find any clues. In the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map, an invisible force flowed quickly. However, it was very gentle, just like a breeze. On a mountain top, it was originally very calm. However, the space trembled and a map appeared. A man fell directly from it. This person was none other than Xiaoyang. After Xiaoyang fell on the mountaintop, he fell to the ground. His eyes were constantly turning black, and his face was extremely ugly. Just now, he wanted to hear what Ziying was saying. However, he didn't expect to alarm the owner of the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. Just one angry snort was enough to injure his divine sense. It was a big taboo to use one's consciousness to invade other people's magic treasure. Therefore, Xiaoyang couldn't expose himself. Therefore, he cut his wrist and forcefully used the convenience of the magic treasure to send his consciousness to the center. Moreover, he used the mountain river map to hide himself so that he wasn't discovered. Even if the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map was a top divine tool, how could the person who owned it be simple? Blood continued to flow out of his mouth, and his eyes became a little lifeless. It could be said that a snort was enough to seriously injure him. He was almost about to faint. With great difficulty, Xiaoyang gathered some strength. He immediately took out a few bottles of elixirs and poured them all into his mouth. At the same time, he lay on the ground and gasped for breath. It was really a thrilling experience. Chapter 1568. If Xiaoyang hadn't forcefully separated a part of his divine sense at the last moment and kept himself in the mountain river map, he would have been discovered by the owner of the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. At that time, he would have encountered more trouble, because there were only 10 days he had to recover his divine sense in this period of time. However, it was easier said than done. After all, he didn't just cut off a part of his divine sense. His divine sense was also severely injured, and it was very uncomfortable now. Fortunately, he had refined a batch of elixirs to repair divine sense, and asked Seng Miaosho to refine a batch of elixirs to nourish the divine sense. There were some leftovers, so they could help him a lot and stabilize his state in a short time. Of course, it was not easy to recover his injured divine sense in these 10 days. Xiaoyang even found that there was an imprint in the depths of his divine sense. It was probably the owner of this world. At the same time, he also tried his best to erase it, which worsened his injuries. It could be said that Xiaoyang was walking on the tip of a knife this time. If he was careless, he would have been smashed into pieces. As long as the owner of the map didn't come to check it personally, Xiaoyang was confident that he wouldn't be discovered. Of course, he was also facing another problem now. If the injury to his divine sense was discovered after 10 days, it would probably leave behind future troubles. At this moment, Xiaoyang was also a little absent-minded. Fortunately, after the elixir's medicinal power dissolved, he became sober and calmed down a lot. Suddenly, Xiaoyang stood up abruptly. Suddenly, a sharp pain came from his divine sense, which made him hold his head very uncomfortably. However, at this moment, Xiaoyang endured the pain and began to be on his guard. This was because he felt a fiery aura. He naturally remembered this aura clearly. It was the aura of the divine fire token. It seemed that someone had already gotten the divine fire token and was coming in his direction. That person's idea was probably very simple and pure. That was to hide in the corner and wait for 10 days to pass. Then he could directly advance to the third round. It had to be said that this person's luck was really bad because the place he was running to was blocked by Xiaoyang. Even if Xiaoyang couldn't stop him, there were still Yang Sun and Ziying behind him. With the two of them, it wouldn't be easy to protect the divine flame token by himself. The aura was getting closer and closer, and the scorching heat was getting more and more intense. In the next moment, a long spear appeared in his hand. Even though Xiaoyang's current state was very bad, how could he not accept the business that came knocking on his door? Moreover, in Xiaoyang's opinion, if he wanted to enter the divine tomb safely, then he needed to obtain a divine fire token right from the start. There were more than 300 people, but there were only 64 spots. How could people not pay attention to this? Very soon, Xiaoyang saw a man in white robes flying over on a sword. He should have been handsome and valiant, but he looked extremely miserable. That was because his robes were damaged and his aura was a lot weaker. Clearly, he was also heavily injured. The person on the sword quickly discovered Xiaoyang. He couldn't help but gasp when he saw the long spear that emitted the power of lightning. Now he was being attacked from both sides. It would be difficult for him to escape no matter where he ran. The white-robed man frowned as he looked at the divine fire badge in his hand. His frown deepened. After all, the current situation was really terrible, and he had to make a choice. Otherwise, his situation would become even worse. The silver lightning spear. The young man suddenly thought of the name of the item and immediately felt somewhat happy. Xiaoyang also saw the young man's robes clearly. Although they were damaged, the sword embroidered on the robes was enough to prove his identity. "Fellow Taoist, are you Xiaoyang?" the young man immediately asked. However, after asking, the young man hesitated. That was because his senior brother had told him not to provoke Xiaoyang if he met him. If he had no other choice, he could seek his help. However, Xiaoyang's reputation plummeted after he entered the God Realm. In the Jade Pool banquet, he didn't say a word in the face of Zhang Xuani's humiliation. In the end, it was Bai Jian who took the lead. In the Western Divine Palace, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly in the face of countless rumors and slanders. Was he really as powerful as senior brother had said? "That's right," Xiaoyang said in a low voice. The young man felt that the pursuers behind him were getting closer and closer. He gritted his teeth and said, "Brother Xiao, I'm Li Chuani from the Sky Sword Realm. Bai Jian is my senior brother. Please be magnanimous." Hearing this, Xiaoyang's eyebrows twitched slightly. This was exactly as he had expected. The cultivator in front of him was from the Sky Sword Realm. Moreover, he directly stated that he was Bai Jian's junior brother. Everything else was fine, but Bai Jian wasn't a bad person. They were friends, and Bai Jian had even helped him at the Jade Pool banquet. Therefore, Xiaoyang still felt a little apologetic about attacking his junior brother. However, the opportunity was right in front of him. Could it be that he would use this favor to lose this opportunity? Thinking of this, Xiaoyang's heart skipped a beat. He really wasn't sure how to choose. Li Chuani saw that Xiaoyang didn't have the slightest fluctuation in his emotions and secretly cursed in his heart. If Xiaoyang really wanted to stop him, The divine fire badge in his hand would probably no longer exist when the pursuers behind them arrived. Moreover, everyone here knew very well that if one person was seriously injured, then naturally he wouldn't be able to come out to fight for it later. There would be one less opponent. As a result, just handing over the divine fire badge wouldn't be enough to protect him. Moreover, he had snatched the divine fire badge by himself, so he obviously wouldn't hand it over so easily. Li Chuanyi was originally rather confident. No matter how powerful he was, he couldn't withstand the repeated attacks of so many people, which was why he had fled in such a dejected manner. However, those who could make it here were all outstanding geniuses. The difference in strength wasn't very great, so the side with more people would often have a great advantage and could even consolidate their advantage. Li Chuanyi, you can't run. Hand over the divine fire badge obediently. At this moment, a rather deep voice rang out. Chapter 1569. Li Chuanyi's face instantly paled when he heard the voice behind him. He was extremely unsightly. He felt very hopeless inside. Was he unable to protect the divine fire badge and would fall in this round of tests? Was he unable to enter the divine tomb to search for his own fortune? Li Chuanyi felt very hopeless when he thought of that. However, the person standing in front of him had suddenly become a ray of light in front of him. If he was really as powerful as Senior Brother Bai Jian said, he might be able to turn the situation around. Therefore, Li Chuanyi had no other choice. It seemed that other than believing in Xiaoyang, he would end up seriously injured, and the news of the divine fire insignia being taken away by someone else. Thinking of that, Li Chuanyi made up his mind and said, "Brother Xiao, please lend me a hand for Senior Brother Bai Jian's sake." He regretted it as soon as he said that because he felt that he had been too naive. Putting aside the fact that Xiaoyang was truly powerful, he had yet to obtain the divine fire badge. So how could he help someone else? Moreover, there was no friendship between the two of them at all. The divine tomb contained a great fortune. So who would want to let go of such a great opportunity? If Li Chuanyi had not spoken, Xiaoyang really would have turned around and left. After all, his soul was injured right now, and he was in a terrible state. However, since the other party had already brought out Bai Jian, this great Buddha, he really couldn't refuse. Afterwards, Xiaoyang looked over and discovered that 3 cultivators had flown over. He began to make his own plans. "I can help you, but you have to keep one of them busy," Xiaoyang said with a frown. It really was quite strenuous for him to fight 3 people alone right now. As long as Li Chuanyi could keep one of them busy, he would be in a much better situation. That way he would feel much better. Li Chuanyi was overjoyed when he heard that. He never thought that Xiaoyang would actually be willing to help him at a time like this. That was truly unexpected. "Brother Xiao, don't worry. It won't be a problem for me to hold back one person," Li Chuanyi said with certainty. For a genius of the Sky Sword realm to be able to come to this place, regardless of talent or strength, he was naturally not bad. If he didn't even have the ability to fight one-on-one, then what was the point of coming here? Soon, Li Chuanyi also flew to Xiaoyang's side, sword in hand. The 3 of them quickly closed in. The 3 of them were wearing long robes and had arrogant looks on their faces. "Haha, I heard that Bai Jian and Xiaoyang have quite a good relationship. Now that I have met you today, it is indeed true." The man leading the group also laughed out loud. Xiaoyang's reputation was very big. Later on, he started to rise and fell. Through word of mouth, almost everyone in the Immortals' capital knew him. However, Xiaoyang didn't say anything. He only held the silver lightning spear tightly. He was using the power of the elixir to nourish his spirit. At this time, if he could recover even a little bit more, then his chances of winning would naturally increase. He's just a piece of trash. He's so suppressed by Zhang Xuanyi that he doesn't even dare to speak. There's no point in living like this. A man also mocked mercilessly. In their eyes, Xiaoyang was a complete piece of trash. He didn't even dare to fart in the face of other people's questioning and suppression. Rumor had it that his cultivation level was only King Wu's rank 7. They didn't know what kind of luck he had to make unrivaled God give his spot to him. For a moment, there was a hint of playfulness in everyone's eyes. They're cultivators from the streamer world. Their names are Zhang Long, Zhang Hu, and Zhou Liaofei. Li Chunyi introduced them one by one. Xiao Yang nodded slightly. At the same time, he was also a little surprised. He didn't expect Li Chunyi to have done his homework so well. He even knew these people's names. Presumably, he had a relatively good understanding of them. Li Chunyi, this ally of yours is funny. You found a piece of trash. Do you think the Sky Sword Realm hasn't lost enough face? Zhang Long laughed out loud. At this moment, Li Chunyi's brows were furrowed even more. After all, the current situation was really terrible. He only knew a little about Xiao Yang's strength from his senior brother. However, he didn't know the specifics. After all, he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. Looking at the long spear, Li Chunyi's heart calmed down a little. It was the silver lightning spear, the weapon of the Thousand Thunder realm Tianbunu. Since he could kill Tianbunu back then, he must be quite powerful. Although this was what he thought, it was only a psychological comfort he gave himself. Xiao Yang's gaze fell on Zhou Liaofei. This was because he had seen this person at the Jade Pool. The fact that he could receive an invitation from a flying ship was enough to show how powerful he was. Of course, this was just one thing to pay attention to. Look, this person must be scared out of his wits. He doesn't even dare to speak now, Zhang Hu also mocked. The corners of Zhou Liaofei's mouth also curled up slightly. He said, Zhang Xuanyi said that if we meet here, he wants your legs. If I do this favor, he will owe me. Zhang Xuanyi was from the God Realm. If he could get a favor from a genius from the God Realm, it would definitely be very useful in the future. Zhou Liaofei was well aware of the trash Xiaoyang. When Zhang Xuanyi humiliated Xiaoyang, he saw it clearly from the side. Moreover, Xiaoyang's current condition was very bad. He looked like he was half dead. It would be easy to deal with him. Could it be that the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map has a weakening effect on a level 7 cultivator like Kingwu? Is that why he looks like he is seriously injured? Zhang Long also noticed that something was wrong with Xiaoyang and continued to mock him. The current Xiaoyang looked no different from a sick cat. He was still in existence that could be casually played with. At this moment, Zhou Liaofei didn't make a move. Instead, his eyes kept wandering around. He knew very well that Yang Sun had always been with Xiaoyang, even when they were in the Western Divine Palace. He didn't leave Xiaoyang to join the royal family. Obviously, they were traveling together. Could Yang Sun be lying in ambush somewhere? He didn't care about Xiaoyang. However, he had to pay more attention to Yang Sun from the God Realm. No need. I got separated from Yang Sun, Xiaoyang said at this moment. He felt that he had almost recovered. At least, it wouldn't be too big of a problem to deal with them. However, Xiaoyang's words didn't make Zhou Liaofei let down his guard. He continued to observe and didn't dare to be careless. Chapter 1570. Could it be that Yang Sun thinks that you're too useless and will drag him down? So he doesn't want to go with you? Zhang Hu said as he laughed out loud. In their eyes, Xiaoyang was a complete joke. When they thought of this, they became even more unscrupulous. At the same time, they also wanted to teach Xiaoyang a lesson. This way, they could use this trash's reputation to gain some fame. At this moment, Li Chunyi was feeling a little hopeless. If he used Yang Sun to scare these two people, there might be a chance to turn things around. Xiaoyang, on the other hand, spoke the truth so straightforwardly. Wasn't he just looking for trouble? Stop talking nonsense. Defeat them and take the Divine Fire Badge. Zhou Liaofei lost his patience and shouted. However, Zhou Liaofei did not act rashly. Instead, he observed from the sky. If Yang Sun appeared, he would take action immediately and stop him. This was the only way to safely take the Divine Fire Badge. It could be said that Zhou Liaofei was the strongest among the three of them. Therefore, his words carried the greatest weight. Second brother, I'll leave Xiaoyang to you. Quickly end the battle and come help me." After Zhang Long finished speaking, he immediately pounced on Li Chuanyi. Previously, they had seen Li Chuanyi's strength clearly. If they did not have the advantage in numbers, they would not be able to match him at all. However, it was not a problem for him to hold him back. Zhang, who shrugged helplessly, he looked at Xiaoyang and rubbed his hands together. He did not expect his big brother to give this opportunity to him. This was good too. He had wanted to teach Xiaoyang a lesson for a long time. This was a great opportunity. Accept reality and enjoy my cruelty. Zhang, who shouted angrily and attacked Xiaoyang directly. Seeing that Zhang, who was charging towards him, Xiaoyang stood still and did not move at all. It was as if he did not see Zhang, who was a threat. On the other hand, Li Chuanyi shouted in a low voice. He pulled out his sword and attacked Zhang Long directly. After all, he had promised Xiaoyang that he would hold someone back. He could only hope that the friend in his senior brother's eyes was powerful enough. Zhang, who saw that Xiaoyang did not move at all, although he had some doubts in his heart, he quickly dispelled them. This guy was just a false reputation. He must be scared silly by his aura and did not dare to move at all. However, this was good too. If he ended the battle early, he could help his big brother deal with Li Chuanyi. Everything would be much simpler this way. Why not? Just as Zhang, who was about to reach Xiaoyang, Xiaoyang made his move. Suddenly, a powerful aura gushed out like a flood. Instantly, Zhang, whose heart was filled with shock. He had never thought that such a situation would occur. Where did this powerful aura come from? Could it be that Yang Sun was hiding in the dark to attack? Very quickly, Zhang to be exact, Xiaoyang's bee he was. Xiaoyang held the silver lightning spear and disappeared in a flash. When he appeared again, he was already in front of Zhang, who, with a roar, the long spear pierced towards Zhang, whose shoulder. Suddenly, Zhang, who also felt an extremely powerful and terrifying force. If he didn't dodge it, he might have died. However, this was not something that Zhang, who could dodge if he wanted to. Because everything happened too quickly, he had no time to react. Chi! The long spear directly pierced through Zhang, whose shoulder. The power that he had gathered was also suddenly released at this time. Immediately, Xiaoyang shook the long spear in his hand. Suddenly, the power of thunder and lightning exploded with a loud bang. Ah! Accompanied by a scream, for a moment, minced meat mixed with a few pieces of bone was thrown down along with a mist of blood. Zhang, whose shoulder was directly blown away. If it were not for the prohibition of killing here, he would have died directly. Of course, even without such a clause, Xiaoyang would not kill him. After all, there was no hatred between them, and there was no need to kill. Zhang, who fell to the ground, and suddenly, Zhou Liaofei's expression changed drastically. Seeing his brother being beaten up like this, Zhang Long was furious. He wanted to go over and take revenge, but he was facing an extremely sharp sword. He did not dare to be careless and immediately retreated, not daring to be rash. Zhou Liaofei looked at everything that happened and suddenly frowned. This was really a little illogical. Previously, he saw with his own eyes that Xiaoyang had not reached the 8th level of King Wu's realm. Under Zhang Xuanyi's pressure, he did not even dare to breathe loudly. He was extremely weak and powerless. But now, why did he become so decisive and strong? Zhang, who lay on the ground, looking at his right shoulder that had disappeared and the bones that were scattered around. He also cried out in pain. If Zhang, who continued to fight, he would probably be crippled directly. He immediately activated his power to protect his heart meridian. Immediately, Xiaoyang's gaze fell on Zhou Liaofei. Just now, because Zhang, who looked down on Xiaoyang, he did not use his full strength and was very arrogant, so he gave Xiaoyang a thunderous blow. It was also because of this that Xiaoyang was able to succeed in one blow and directly cripple him. However, Zhou Liaofei did not make a move. Instead, he saw everything clearly. He was the one who was difficult to deal with. I didn't expect you to make a breakthrough in just a few days, Zhou Liaofei said with some surprise. Immediately, Zhou Liaofei thought of Xiaoyang's crazy eating and drinking at the Jade Pool banquet. That was just to build the foundation for a breakthrough. He did not expect that such a gamble would succeed. Xiaoyang pointed the long spear in his hand at Zhou Liaofei and said, "Are you sure you want to continue?" When these words came out, Zhou Liaofei laughed. "You've severely injured my junior brother. Do you think you can just let this matter slide? Moreover, Zhang Hu only let you succeed in one blow because of his carelessness. Do you think that you can be a match for me when you just broke through to King Wu level 8? Zhou Liaofei said coldly. At this moment, Zhou Liaofei could already be sure that Yang Sun was not around. If Yang Sun was really lying in ambush in the dark, he should have made a move when he was surprised just now. Looking at Xiaoyang's attack just now, he was very confident in himself. This was enough to explain many problems. Xiaoyang was also very confident, so he told the truth. However, after breaking through a level, he was so arrogant. Zhou Liaofei also began to be ruthless in his heart. He felt that Xiaoyang would become the second Zhang Hu. Chapter 1571. For a moment, Li Chunyi's heart was filled with shock. He did not expect Xiaoyang to end the battle so quickly and cripple Zhang Hu, causing him to lose his ability to fight. This made him feel a lot more excited. In this way, their chances of winning were greater. Previously, Li Chunyi thought that Xiaoyang's performance at the Jade Lake banquet was too weak. He thought that Xiaoyang's strength must have been exaggerated, although he did not see it with his own eyes. The results showed that Yi Shiwen really had the strength. His battle record of killing Tian Bunu was not unfounded. It was no wonder that senior brother Bai Jian praised Xiaoyang so much. So that was the reason. Xiaoyang did not fight at the Jade Lake banquet because he deliberately hid his strength. He wanted these people to think that he was not strong enough. Then he would pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. It could be said that those idiots were pigs and Xiaoyang was a real tiger. He could take your life with a single strike. Zhou Liaofei shouted. Suddenly, a stream of light flashed in his hand. A giant axe flashing with light appeared. After the giant axe appeared, a powerful aura was immediately emitted. The golden light was dazzling, causing people to shudder involuntarily when they saw it. Brother Xiao, be careful. That's the Calamity Light axe. It's a sacred weapon. Li Chunyi exclaimed when he saw it. Hearing this, Xiaoyang frowned slightly. A sacred weapon was indeed powerful. However, it wasn't as if Xiaoyang didn't have any. Moreover, the silver lightning spear in his hand was also a sacred artifact. Furthermore, it had been fused with a silent thunder bead. Its grade had also increased. Its power was not necessarily much weaker than Zhou Liaofei's Calamity Light axe. Since Yi Shiwen had taken out a sacred weapon to fight, it was obvious that he was going to use his full strength. Zhou Liaofei was not a fool. Xiaoyang's thunderous attack was enough to explain many problems. Yi Shiwen was not a piece of trash. He was very strong. If he was careless or arrogant, he would probably end up like Zhang Hu. Zhang, who was still wailing on the ground. It was like a reminder. How could he turn a blind eye to it? Take this. Zhou Liaofei roared as he waved the Calamity Light axe in his hand and slashed at Xiaoyang. Although Zhou Liaofei hadn't arrived yet, the axe in his hand chopped out a few light blades, directly chopping down toward Xiaoyang. The light blade looked thin, but it was very sharp. Even a mountain would be split apart by this light blade. Xiaoyang had no choice but to be prepared for such a powerful attack. However, his expression was a little dazed right now. He had used too much strength in that thunderous attack, causing his spirit to tremble a little. The attack arrived in the blink of an eye. He did not dare to slow down in the slightest. He forcibly moved his body, constantly drifting. Boom, boom. Every light blade landed on the ground, but not a trace of dust flew up. Instead, a huge gully appeared. It was obvious how terrifying the power of the light blade was. If it really landed on a person, they would probably be split in half. Even though Xiao Yang's defense was amazing, if he was really hit, he would not feel good in the end. He might even be seriously injured. Xiao Yang did not have the slightest doubt in his heart. He quickly waved the spear in his hand, and several lightning bolts surged out. Zhou Liaofei's movement technique was also very agile. As he moved left and right, he easily avoided the power of the lightning. Of course, it was impossible to use such a simple method to force Zhou Liaofei to retreat. After all, Yi Shiwen was also a genius. On the other hand, Xiao Yang's original intention was to slow down his opponent's attack so that he could gain some time to catch his breath. At this moment, the giant axe had already arrived in the sky and was slashing down. It was as if this attack was unavoidable. When the axe fell, Xiao Yang's body would be split in half. The brief moment of time that Xiao Yang managed to buy was more than enough for him. He clenched his teeth and held onto the end of his spear, sweeping it horizontally across the battlefield. At this moment, the lightning also surged out. It was very powerful. It could be said that they were competing to see who was faster, who would be killed, and who would be split in half at the waist. Immediately, Zhou Liaofei's heart was filled with shock. This Xiao Yang was simply a madman. This way of fighting was completely a move that would cause both sides to suffer. For a moment, Zhou Liaofei's axe, which had already formed a great momentum, did not dare to continue descending. Instead, he quickly retreated. Xiao Yang, who had rich battle experience, was naturally not impulsive. He knew very well that his silver lightning spear was much longer than Zhou Liaofei's calamity light axe. If Zhou Liaofei insisted, he would be split in half at the waist first. At that time, he would use his protective weapon to block it. Then, Yi Shiwen would naturally not be able to do anything to him. Zhou Liaofei, who had retreated to the side, was about to spit fire from his eyes. He thought that Xiao Yang was easier to deal with. He did not expect him to be so shrewd. If he knew about Xiao Yang's performance in the Mountain Wheel realm, his jaw would have dropped to the ground. Moreover, Xiao Yang's condition was not very good now. Otherwise, he would not have been able to fight evenly with his opponent. Moreover, his aura was even somewhat suppressed. Zhou Liaofei's chest was also heaving up and down. In his mind, he was also constantly thinking about how to defeat such a strong opponent. All of a sudden, the various rumors and slanders merged together. It was clear at a glance which sentence was true and which sentence was false. With such valiant strength, how could it be possible that he was just a clown? I have to admit that you are indeed very strong, Zhou Liaofei also said with incomparable emotion. Although he said that he had already made up his mind to defeat Xiao Yang, this was the only way to label him as a piece of trash. Otherwise, he would become Yi Shiwen's stepping stone. This was something that absolutely could not be allowed to happen. Thinking of this, Zhou Liaofei also roared. Immediately, the aura on his body also skyrocketed. Even his body began to emit streams of light. Obviously, he could no longer endure it. After realizing how strong his opponent was, Zhou Liaofei had no choice but to take out his trump card. After all, if the battle dragged on for too long and more cultivators came, the situation would become even more chaotic and difficult to control. At that time, it would not be easy for him to obtain the divine fire insignia safely. Chapter 1572. Zhou Liaofei's body constantly glowed. Due to using a secret technique unique to the sect, his battle prowess had increased by quite a bit. He looked like a god as he stood there with his axe in hand, giving off an unshakable sense of majesty. For a moment, the atmosphere became tense. The aura in the surroundings became scorching hot due to the divine fire badge, but it became even more tense because of Zhou Liaofei. Xiao Yang also covered his forehead with one hand. He could sense the difficulty of the battle. Now that Zhou Liaofei's battle prowess had increased again, Xiao Yang's soul was a little dizzy from the intense battle. If this continued, he would probably be at a greater disadvantage. Zhou Liaofei also noticed this. Immediately, A trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Very soon, Zhou Liaofei thought of another possibility, which was that Xiaoyang had forcefully used a secret technique to increase his cultivation. Now it was starting to backfire, which was why he was in so much pain. When he thought of that, a disdainful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. So he was still a piece of trash. He was just bluffing before. Now that the time was up, it was only natural for him to show his true colors. Although that was what he thought, Zhou Liaofei did not let his guard down at all. In order to avoid any more accidents, the best method was to cripple Xiaoyang and make him unable to continue fighting. Moreover, Zhou Liaofei also discovered that Zhang Long's current situation was very bad. He was already covered in wounds from Li Chuanyi's crazy attacks. It was probably only a matter of time before he was defeated. As a result, he had to end the battle quickly and help Zhang Long. Your second round of the test is over. Zhou Liaofei scolded coldly as if he was announcing something. Immediately, the corners of Xiaoyang's mouth curled up slightly. It was still uncertain whose test had ended. In the next moment, the heavenly Qin mountain suddenly appeared above Zhou Liaofei and crashed down. In an instant, Zhou Liaofei also felt an incomparably huge pressure. At the same time, he was also incomparably shocked. Could it be that a sacred tool was so worthless? Xiaoyang actually had two of them. This was a little too terrifying. Zhou Liaofei was the #1 genius in the sect, and the treatment he received was extraordinary. Yet he only had a calamity light axe. Afterwards, Zhou Liaofei snorted coldly and immediately formed hand seals. Immediately, a huge spaceship appeared out of nowhere, blocking the pressure from the heavenly Qin mountain. The flying ship was also a saint-level Dharma treasure, which was why it could rival the heavenly Qin mountain. Seeing this, Xiaoyang sneered. It was as if he didn't have an airship. The airship belonging to Xiaoyang also appeared out of thin air and slammed into Zhou Liaofei. For a moment, Zhou Liaofei also woke up. Xiaoyang had also been to the Jade Lake, and he also had an airship. In total, Xiaoyang had 3 saint-level magic treasures in his possession. Wasn't this a little too terrifying? It could be said that he had been crushed in terms of artifacts. For a moment, Zhou Liaofei felt very helpless. How could he fight like this? One controlled the heavenly Qin mountain, the other controlled the airship. Moreover, these were 2 saint-level Dharma treasures. It was also very taxing on Xiaoyang's soul. As a result, Xiaoyang's situation was undoubtedly worse. However, there was no other way. If he didn't crush him like this, it would be impossible to end the battle quickly. The longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for Xiaoyang. Therefore, he could only do this. Zhou Liaofei didn't dare to hesitate. He roared angrily, and the calamity light axe in his hand emitted light again. Calamity light heaven-slaying axe. Zhou Liaofei roared. Immediately, countless streams of light were emitted, constantly attacking the airship. Since he didn't have as many saint-level Dharma treasures as Xiaoyang, there was nothing he could do. Therefore, all he could do was use his own strength to shake the airship. Xiaoyang looked at Zhou Liaofei's attack, and the corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. This move could be said to be exactly what he wanted. His hand seals continued to form, causing ripples to appear in the space. Greater teleportation technique. Xiaoyang roared, and ripples appeared in front of the airship. Countless light blades also quickly slashed out. Every time they landed on the airship, they would leave scars. Although the airship was also a saint-level Dharma treasure, it would still be damaged in the face of such an attack. Although some of the light blades would mysteriously disappear, Zhou Liaofei couldn't care so much now. After all, the most important thing now was to suppress the airship's attack. That was the most important thing. At the same time, Xiaoyang moved again. 7 steps of the barbaric steps. Every step would cause ripples to appear in the space. Even Zhou Liaofei, who was in the air, felt the vibration and was somewhat restricted. Zhou Liaofei didn't have time to think about the details now. What he could do now was to deal with the situation at hand with all his strength. The spatial vibration was also getting more and more powerful, each time stronger than the previous. Suddenly, ripples appeared in the space behind Zhou Liaofei, and in the next moment, countless light blades also quickly appeared. Idiot! These light blades directly slashed at Zhou Liaofei's back. Suddenly, he was surprised. Why did those attacks that disappeared appear behind him? Suddenly, Zhou Liaofei didn't have time to think about these questions carefully. The light on his body also became stronger again. Now, he had no way to deal with this at all because the airship was still in the midst of the attack. The only thing he could do was to use all of his protective Dharma treasures. Only in this way could he deal with everything with ease. Countless battle experience also told him that this was the only thing he could do. Boom! The light blades bombarded the light curtain, and the sound of shattering was also constantly heard. Countless Dharma treasures were also directly shattered. However, as the first disciple, he naturally had many Dharma treasures. Although Zhou Liaofei was extremely distressed, he had no choice but to force himself to endure. It could be said that now Zhou Liaofei hated Xiaoyang to the core. This time his losses were really too great. He was afraid that half of his Dharma treasures would be consumed in this battle. That was a huge sum of money. How could he not be distressed? The stronger the hatred, the more ruthless Zhou Liaofei was. He even had the intention to kill. However, at this time, the situation changed again. A chill also came from the heart. Xiaoyang had already taken the last step, and this step landed on the top of his opponent's head. Chapter 1573. Zhou Liaofei couldn't withstand the immense pressure at all. Instantly, his chest felt like it was hit hard. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body fell rapidly. Boom! After Zhou Liaofei's body landed on the ground, a huge crater was created. It looked especially vast. Just the huge force of the stomp had already caused him to be severely injured. Many of the bones in his body were even shattered. However, Xiaoyang's attack didn't stop because he knew very well that an attack of this level wouldn't be able to make his opponent completely lose his ability to fight. He wasn't trying to kill him, but Xiaoyang knew very well that if he crippled Zhou Liaofei now, he wouldn't be able to recover his strength within 10 days. Then he would have one less opponent in the second round of the assessment. He raised the silver lightning spear, and the power of lightning gathered again. In the next moment, he threw it down. Zhou Liaofei looked at the long spear that was flickering with the power of lightning coming towards him. He was instantly terrified. He wanted to dodge, but the pain of his broken bones and the chaos of his breath made him unable to move at all. Could it be that his journey in the realm of the gods was going to end here? Zhou Liaofei thought so, and the fear in his heart grew bigger. At the same time, he was also very unwilling. This was just the beginning. Was everything going to end? Chi! The cold, long spear pierced Zhou Liaofei's shoulder and exploded. His shoulder blade and ribs were shattered together, turning his flesh into a bloody mess. Xiaoyang rushed down. He held the silver lightning spear and felt dizzy for a moment. His vision turned black and he almost fainted. Such a high-intensity battle was indeed a little too much for him to bear for a while. Fortunately, everything was over now. Zhou Liaofei had been defeated by him and was severely injured. It was difficult for him to continue fighting. Xiaoyang was also panting heavily. His chest was heaving up and down. He looked like he was in great pain. However, Zhou Liaofei was in the most pain. He got Princess Mingzhu's invitation letter with his own strength and also got a spot in the assessment. He was supposed to be soaring in fame, but he was mercilessly wiped out by Xiaoyang. As such, his heart was filled with endless pain. The physical pain seemed insignificant now, but the mental torment was the most unbearable. Haha. Everyone says that you're trash, but when you think about your own face, you're really ignorant. Xiaoyang, you hit it so well. Zhou Liaofei roared with great unwillingness. Only now did Zhou Liaofei realize that Xiaoyang had been hiding his strength ever since he entered the God realm. He only wanted to make those people arrogant and complacent, thinking that they could easily defeat their opponents like this. Indeed, someone who was able to gain the recognition of unrivaled God from the palace, and was even willing to give up his spot. How could he be an ordinary person? How could he be a good-for-nothing? Xiaoyang also helplessly laughed bitterly and said, "It's not that I want to hide it, but Yang Sun told me that there are many taboos in the divine realm, and it's best to be careful. Therefore, if I don't do anything, I won't violate those taboos." Hearing this, Zhou Liaofei was also choked to the point of speechlessness. The reason why Xiaoyang didn't attack and didn't fight back was because he was afraid of the rules of the God realm. Thinking about this, Xiaoyang didn't dare to attack, simply because he wasn't clear about the rules of the God realm. However, in this 10 directions 8 wasteland map, as long as they didn't kill, it didn't matter even if they fought until the sky turned dark. I accept it wholeheartedly. Zhou Liaofei laughed bitterly. Now, Zhou Liaofei also deeply understood that Xiaoyang was like a crouching, ferocious beast who just couldn't be bothered to argue with barking dogs. On the other hand, some barking dogs thought that a ferocious tiger was a sick cat, which was the most laughable point. However, in this forest, the ferocious tiger had already stood up. If those barking dogs dared to continue, they would have to accept the cruel reality. Give up, let's go out for treatment now. With the methods of the God realm, it shouldn't affect the root bone. Xiaoyang took a deep breath and said. Immediately, he pulled out the silver lightning spear and leaned on it to support his body so that he wouldn't fall down. Hearing these words, Zhou Liaofei's heart was filled with despair. However, he was very clear that Xiaoyang's spear at the end was to force him to withdraw from this test. He had already lost. Although he still had 10 days to recover, could he really recover from such heavy injuries? Even though he brought a lot of medicinal pills, the consumption was huge. Similarly, the effect wouldn't be as good as expected. At this time, Zhang Long had also lost. Li Chunyi stood on top of a mountain and looked at the scene in front of him. The corner of his mouth was twitching constantly. Li Chunyi felt that his strength was above Zhang Long, but he still had to spend a lot of time to defeat him. However, Xiaoyang was actually faster than him and even crippled 2 people. Seems like this is the only way. Zhou Liaofei said helplessly. After all, it was too difficult for him to pass the second round of the test in his current state. If he continued to fight forcefully, he was afraid that his bones would be damaged. At that time, he would reach the end of his cultivation journey. Zhou Liaofei didn't dare to take this huge gamble. In the next moment, Zhou Liaofei forced himself to stand up and rushed out of the 10 directions 8 wasteland map with all his strength. Seeing this, Zhang Long and Zhang, who felt helpless, they also gritted their teeth and used the last of their strength to follow Zhou Liaofei. Their injuries were too serious, but they didn't have to worry too much. As long as they got out of the 10 directions 8 wasteland map, the people from the realm of the gods would naturally help them. After seeing the 3 of them leave, Xiaoyang directly fell to the ground. He was so tired that he almost closed his eyes. It was mainly the impact on his divine soul that made him feel too uncomfortable. If it wasn't for his greed to test the 10 directions 8 wasteland map, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state after receiving a blow from the owner of this place. Seeing Xiaoyang suddenly fall to the ground, Li Chunyi quickly rushed over. However, Xiaoyang only looked at Li Chunyi with a cold gaze. His hand that was holding the silver lightning spear tightened. In the second round of the test, they all wanted to obtain the qualification to enter the divine tomb. Therefore, anything could happen. Perhaps they were allies just now, but now they might be enemies who were fighting for their own interests. After feeling the cold gaze, Li Chunyi stood still and didn't dare to act rashly. Chapter 1574. For a moment, the atmosphere also became somewhat solemn, because this was a test. If it wasn't for the fact that they knew each other well, who would dare to easily trust the people by their side? Many times, friends who suddenly became friends for some kind of benefit When it came to having to face the benefits head-on, it was very easy to split up. Even things like drawing swords against each other or backstabbing because of these benefits were also not uncommon. The human heart had always been sinister, let alone in front of this huge opportunity. Who did not want to have one less powerful opponent to ensure that they could grasp the opportunity safely? At this moment, Li Chuanyi looked at the Xiaoyang lying on the ground, and traces of thoughts also appeared in his heart. Right now, Xiaoyang's condition looked very terrible. Furthermore, he defeated Zhang, who in Zhou Liaofei with thunderous means previously. He was seriously too strong. Such an opponent, if he waited for him to recover, wanting to snatch his divine fire token might be an easy matter. At this moment, although Xiaoyang's divine sense was very absent-minded, his battle experience made him grip his weapon tightly. If there was the slightest bit of trouble, he would be able to stand up and fight. One could say that this was also a temperament that was tempered by experiencing countless battles. Immediately, Li Chuanyi also stabbed his saber into the ground and sat down, saying, "Brother Xiao, you don't have to worry. This divine fire token should belong to you in the first place. If not for you, the one eliminated just now would probably be me." Xiaoyang listened and did not speak, but also did not relax his vigilance. The situation of a smiling tiger was not few, and he had seen it before. As for whether Li Chuanyi was sincere or faking it, that was not clear. "I didn't get eliminated, there's still a chance. You and senior apprentice brother, by Jian's friendship, is extraordinary. This time, you even helped me get seriously injured. You rest assured, I'll sit here and wait for you to recover before leaving," Li Chuanyi said in a low voice. In Li Chuanyi's opinion, if he were to leave now, it would be too unkind of him. This also seriously went against his sword heart. A man walking between heaven and earth naturally had a righteous, heroic spirit and not opportunistic. There was one thing that Li Chuanyi was not very clear about, and that was that Xiaoyang's injuries were not from the battle with the flowing light world Zhou Liaofei. With Xiaoyang's rest and the nourishment of the medicinal efficacies, Xiaoyang's situation began to improve a lot. At the very least, his consciousness had temporarily stabilized and was no longer as erratic. Seeing that Li Chuanyi was really sitting there to protect him without any malicious intent, Xiaoyang heaved a sigh of relief. Of course, he also thought of Bai Jian. Presumably, the people in the Heaven Sword realm pursued a heart of the sword. Therefore, they were clear about gratitude and grudges, and were straightforward. This was the true intent that they cultivated, which allowed their swords to become even sharper and more straightforward. There were tens of thousands of techniques in the world, and each choice was different. However, no matter which path he chose, he needed to maintain a good mentality. Only in this way could he truly achieve sharp progress. It could be said that the sorrow of the God realm was enough to explain many problems. Their minds were already in a mess, and the time they spent on cultivation was also becoming less and less. Even their mind was not much left. Therefore, it was very easy for them to become stagnant. All of a sudden, Li Chuanyi also suddenly pulled out his sword. His entire aura also abruptly became strong and incomparably sharp. Xiaoyang did not move, because he was very clear that if Li Chuanyi wanted to make a move on him, a sneak attack was the best. There was no need to release his aura at all. Sometimes, if the aura released was strong enough, it could also intimidate the enemy. Li Chuanyi probably did this because he also sensed that someone was approaching. That was why he did this. After all, he had the divine fire token on him. It could be said that he was a living target that would be easily detected and discovered by others. Not long after, Li Chuanyi saw a man and a woman rushing over. Li Chuanyi placed his sword horizontally in front of his chest and said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, please stop." That man and woman did not stop their advancing footsteps. Instead, they continued forward. Since the divine fire token was right in front of them, how could they let it go? Li Chuanyi immediately understood the other party's intention. He snorted coldly, and his sword aura surged. Since they did not reply, it made their stance clear. They could only fight Although it was slightly difficult to fight one against two, Li Chunyi had no way out at all. Even if he lost, he had to hold on. Behind him was the heavily injured Xiaoyang, who had yet to recover. Therefore, he could not leave and had to stop them. For a moment, sword qi constantly surged out. The sharp aura also became exceptionally sharp. Even the ground beneath his feet had inadvertently become streaks of sword marks. "Yang Sun, it's a friend!" Xiaoyang suddenly shouted. They were Yang Sun and Ziying. They were searching for Xiaoyang's whereabouts in this corner, but they did not expect to sense the aura of the divine fire token. Therefore, they immediately came over to snatch it. After all, it was not easy to find the divine fire insignia in such a remote place. As a result, how could they miss out on such a great opportunity? As a result, they came without hesitation. When they heard Xiaoyang's voice, Yang Sun and Ziying immediately stopped attacking. Li Chunyi immediately sheathed his sword when he knew the identity of the other party. The sword qi also disappeared without a trace. It was as if nothing had happened at all, and everything was calm and peaceful. At the same time, Li Chunyi let out a sigh of relief. Since Yang Sun had come, he would be much safer with his addition. Moreover, he could leave without worry. "I am Li Chunyi from the Sky Sword Realm. It's my pleasure to meet the two of you." Li Chunyi also clasped his fist and said. Yang Sun smiled when he saw that. He said thank you. Xiaoyang lay on the ground. His aura was very weak. Clearly, he was heavily injured, while Li Chunyi was guarding him. Yang Sun also had mixed feelings. He did not expect so many things to happen in such a short period of time. It made him sigh. Now, it seemed that Xiaoyang's friend was indeed a good person. Even under such circumstances, he was still guarding his safety. On the other hand, Ziying was furious when she saw Xiaoyang's pale appearance. She said, "Little brother, who beat you up like this? Tell big sister, and I'll take revenge for you." After saying that, Ziying waved her fist. She had a very angry appearance. Yang Sun's gaze quickly swept across the ground. There were several large pits and bloodstains. Clearly, there had been a great battle. Chapter 1575. At the same time, Yang Sun was also surprised in his heart. The intensity of this battle was extraordinary. Flesh and blood were mixed on the ground, and there were even some bone fragments. Although he didn't see much destruction, he could get a lot of information from the situation of this battlefield. At this time, Ziying quickly ran over and helped Xiaoyang up. Looking at his pale face, she immediately burned with anger. He was actually beaten so miserably. His aura was really too weak. "Who is it? Big sister will help you," Ziying said angrily. Xiaoyang looked at the cute little girl and smiled. "Big sister, don't worry. That person is no longer in this 10 directions, 8 wastelands map." Hearing this, the little girl's anger didn't seem to subside. She still looked angry. Yang Sun walked towards Li Chunyi. He didn't want to snatch the divine fire token, but wanted to ask what the situation was just now. After learning that Xiaoyang crippled Zhang Hu with a thunderous blow and even fought Zhou Liaofei, he felt somewhat gratified. But at the same time, he also had a doubt in his heart. Xiaoyang didn't have any obvious injuries on his body. Even his robe didn't have any damage. How did he get injured? Even Li Chunyi didn't notice this. When he met Xiaoyang, his mind was on the pursuers. He didn't notice anything unusual about Xiaoyang at all. Therefore, he always thought that Xiaoyang was injured in the battle with Zhou Liaofei. After half a day of rest, Xiaoyang finally stood up and stabilized his consciousness. It was no longer as weak as before. Next, he would continue to nourish it. It was only a matter of time before he recovered. However, if he went through another battle, there would still be some complications. Yang Sun and Li Chunyi also had a good chat. Their opinions were similar. "I remember that the Sky Sword Realm also has a few spots this time. Why don't you go and meet with them?" Yang Sun asked. Li Chunyi also appeared to be rather helpless. He shook his head and said, "We don't know much about the 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. It looks like we have landed in the same place, but we are very far apart. In addition, I was greedy and snatched the divine fire token. Being chased by the flowing light world, we were separated. If his fellow apprentices were here, Li Chuni would not be afraid of the flowing light world. Moreover, geniuses from other places were also fighting for the divine fire insignia, which was why he fled in a panic. Fortunately, he met Xiaoyang. Otherwise, the trouble would be really big, and it might even get out of hand. Since Brother Xiao has more or less recovered, then I will take my leave. Brother Xiao fought bitterly to protect this divine fire badge, so it should belong to him. Li Chuni also very generously took out the divine fire badge and handed it to Yang Sen. However, Yang Sen didn't accept it because he didn't know if he should accept it. If they fought as soon as they met, they would naturally take them down. However, the fact that Li Chun was willing to protect Xiaoyang was enough to show their friendship. Although they were very moved in front of this enormous opportunity, they had not broken through the bottom line in their hearts yet. After all, this second round test had merely just begun. Moreover, I still have to go find my fellow apprentices and rendezvous with them. Even if I take this item, it's also just swaggering through the streets. With my power alone, it's hard to protect it completely. You all can also be considered as helping me resolve this trouble, Li Chuni said. One could say that what Li Chuni said was also indeed the truth. In this place, because of strength being more or less the same, they were all grouped together, wanting to protect one's own opportunity single-handedly. That was also absolutely not an easy thing. At this time, Xiaoyang opened his mouth and said, "This divine fire badge was obtained by you in the first place. I'm not so thick-skinned to dare accept it." Just now, Li Chuni treated him sincerely, guarding him with peace of mind. Therefore, Xiaoyang also admired this person's integrity very much. Therefore, he had no need to accept this divine fire badge either. Furthermore, 64 spots. There was still quite a lot of time left. No need to worry at all. Hearing that, Li Chuni also frowned slightly, and his heart was filled with emotions. However, now was not the time to be modest, because the divine fire badge was a hot potato in Li Chuni's hands at the moment. Xiaoyang had 3 people, so there was a high chance that they could protect it. Because of this, he could also do a favor, so why not? On the other hand, he found it difficult to accept Xiaoyang's current approach. "You don't have to worry. Just follow us. We'll help you find your fellow apprentices," Xiaoyang said, as if he could see Li Chuni's worry. Li Chuni was also very surprised by his words. If that was the case, the situation would be somewhat different. You don't have to think too much. Moreover, if we want to obtain the divine fire badge, the one in your hands is also indispensable, Xiaoyang continued. Hearing that, everyone raised their eyebrows. Wasn't that a little too arrogant? Since the divine fire badge could be sensed, those teams would naturally come over to snatch it. As long as they had it in their hands, snatching it would naturally be a logical thing to do. This Xiaoyang was truly a person with great skills and guts. His way of thinking was indeed a little crazy. He was using the method of flaunting himself in the market to bait the teams that wanted to snatch. It would instead have to pay a heavy price. "Little brother, I didn't know that you were so smart," Xing said as she continued to act like an old man. She tiptoed and patted Xiaoyang's shoulder. Xiaoyang immediately changed his expression and nodded with a smile. "But brother Xiao, your injuries," Li Chuni said worriedly. At this moment, Xing snorted in disdain and said, "With me around, they will definitely obediently hand over the divine fire badge. Otherwise, I'll beat them up until they look like pigs." Those who could enter this place were naturally not weak. Although the person in front of him was just a little girl, Li Chuni did not think that she was weak and could be bullied. However, he wasn't sure exactly how strong the little girl was. "I think this method will work. Xiaoyang's current condition is not good. However, if the 3 of us work together, as long as it's not a big team, we will have the power to fight. If the number of people is about the same, we can still consider it. Yang Sun said very seriously. Moreover, if they had Li Chunyi's help during this period of time, their strength would also increase significantly. Moreover, the three of them were only a small team. Xiaoyang was also seriously injured, so his combat strength was greatly reduced. It was very suitable to temporarily supplement Li Chunyi. Chapter 1576. After weighing the pros and cons, Li Chunyi nodded his head and agreed to it. In fact, he knew very well that if Xiaoyang did not accept the divine fire badge and he carried it alone, it would be snatched away in the end. After all, 2 fists could not fight against 4 hands. Moreover, those who could enter the second round of the assessment were all geniuses from all over the world. They all had extraordinary strength, and the gap between them was very small. Perhaps if it was only one person, Li Chunyi could still handle it. If there were more, it would be too difficult to protect the divine fire badge for 10 days. Furthermore, traveling together with Xiaoyang and the others was a very comfortable thing to do. Just now he had also displayed his strength. Even if they were to encounter other teams, they would still have the power to fight. Although Xiaoyang's current state was very bad, how could he not be prepared when he entered this place? Moreover, Yang Sun and Ziying were both well-known figures in the divine world. Their strength was naturally not bad. If the 4 of them worked together, they still had a great chance. During this period of time, if they could find their comrades and act together, it would naturally be a win-win situation. Although they did not know what kind of changes would occur in the future and how it would develop, at least they could guarantee that there would be no worries at the moment. Li Chunyi was also a very realistic person. He knew very well that if it were not for Xiaoyang's help this time, he would probably have appeared in the Western Divine Palace and would not be able to move forward at all. Moreover, he would be qualified to continue the assessment. Then it's settled. During this period of time, I will protect you. Ziying also said cheerfully. Since Ziying did not stand with the people of the imperial family, she naturally had already prepared for the worst. Now that someone had joined their small team, their chances would naturally be greater. After chatting for a while, they continued to move forward and moved closer to the central region. Although Li Chunyi had a divine fire badge, Xiaoyang and the others did not have this item. If they wanted to advance to the next round, they would not have a chance. Therefore, they had to snatch 3 more badges now to be able to think about defending their achievements. No matter which part it was relatively important. Xiaoyang's divine sense also gradually stabilized under the power of the medicinal pills. However, if he encountered a fierce battle, there would still be some problems. However, he didn't panic at all. After all, Yang Sun and Ziying had joined them, so he had nothing to worry about. After walking for a long time, they still found nothing. A day passed, and they didn't find any other cultivators. It could be said that the competition in the central region was the most intense right now. Most of the 64 divine fire tokens were distributed in the central region. In the remote areas, it could be said to be pitifully few. This was also something that the God realm had done on purpose. They wanted the situation inside to become even more intense. Only in this way could the battle reach its climax, and the final victor, be it in terms of strength, luck, or intelligence, would definitely be the cream of the crop among the 300-plus geniuses. And during this period of time, Xiaoyang also had a great opportunity to recover and stabilize his divine sense. Moreover, there were still 9 days left. There was no need to rush. It could be said that everyone had a tacit understanding. In fact, many people or teams wouldn't even participate in the battle in the early stages. After all, as time passed, more and more people would be eliminated, and those who were still able to protect the divine fire token after a bitter battle would have probably been spent a long time ago. So, fighting for it at that time would naturally be the best choice. Of course, luck was especially important in doing this, and it was also suitable for the style of a small team. If in the end you couldn't even touch a single divine fire token, then it would be meaningless no matter how much strength you conserved. Another day passed, and Xiaoyang's divine sense had recovered by 60 to 70%. Of course, their progress was also very slow. The reason for this was also very important. They wanted to conserve their strength. Moreover, Xiao Yang's injuries were quite serious. If they continued to fight, it would be very bad. Xiao Yang sat on a big rock. He felt his sea of consciousness, although there were still some cracks, and the parts that he had abandoned hadn't completely recovered. It was enough to support him to continue fighting. There were still 8 days left. How to spend it was still a very big problem. After all, how to advance to the next round was especially important. Li Chuanyi, you'll walk in front. The 3 of us will follow behind and hide our presences. We'll also purposely maintain a distance of 9 kilometers from each other, Xiao Yang said very seriously. Xiao Yang could not help but suspect that some people might have seen them walking together, so they didn't dare to make a move out of fear. Now that he had more or less recovered, it was naturally feasible to use Li Chuanyi as bait to lure out those who had other thoughts. As for why they maintained a distance of 9 kilometers, the reason was very simple. It was because they wanted to sense the divine fire tokens. Only then could they rush over to provide support as soon as possible if something happened. Li Chuanyi nodded slightly when he heard that. Their original plan was to use the divine fire insignia to lure those teams over and then snatch their divine fire insignia. Brother Xiao, are your injuries okay? Li Chuanyi asked worriedly. Zi Ying patted her chest at this time and said, What are you worried about? Even if Xiao Yang can't make a move, there's still me. Her words made Li Chuanyi smile bitterly. Zi Ying had never made a move before. As for her strength, he wasn't very clear. However, after interacting with her for 2 days, he knew that Zi Ying was just a little girl. If they really fought, it was really hard to say what would happen because of her immature nature. It's fine, Yang Sin added. Xiao Yang also nodded with a smile and said, Trust in our strength and condition. Li Chuanyi immediately felt a lot more at ease when he heard that. Although the little girl was a variable, Xiao Yang and Yang Sin could definitely be trusted. Moreover, it was really a little aimless to keep walking towards the central region. Calculating the time, the first round of battles should be almost over. Next, it was time to spread out and protect their qualifications for advancement. Li Chuanyi directly took the lead and rushed forward. Chapter 1577. Seeing Li Chuanyi leave, Xiao Yang and Yang Sin also stood in place to rest. They were not in a hurry to follow. They needed to deliberately distance themselves. If possible, they could even cast the line longer. After all, only by casting a long line could they catch a big fish. However, doing so would also be very risky. If they were slightly careless and encountered a big fish, they would not have time to retract the line. They were afraid that the bait would be swallowed in one gulp. At that time, it would really not be worth the loss. Feeling the scorching aura getting farther and farther away, Li Chuanyi flew on his sword in midair. His speed was not very fast. Instead, it felt a little leisurely. Li Chuanyi also knew very well that he had to stand in a conspicuous place so that he could be easily discovered, whether it was by his opponents or his allies. Even if there was a problem, he would be able to respond immediately and not suffer a loss. After pulling enough distance, Xiao Yang and Yang Sin also deliberately suppressed their auras and walked forward slowly. Their pace was not the slightest bit hurried. They did not dare to relax their vigilance and also vigilantly observed their surroundings. As long as there was any movement in the wind, they would notice it. Sure enough, with Li Chuanyi's ostentatious behavior, it did not take long for a fish to bite the bait. However, the fish that took the bait was not very big. It was only a small team of 2 people. After these 2 people sensed the aura of the divine fire badge, they quickly rushed over. Because they were anxious, they were discovered by Yang Sin. Yang Sin and Xiao Yang looked at each other and already knew what each other was thinking. The 3 of them also sped up and immediately stopped the 2 cultivators. Because the 2 cultivators did not have the divine fire badge, there was no need to fight. It was enough to scare them away. When the 2 cultivators saw Xiao Yang and the other 2 appear, they immediately stopped. They exchanged glances and understood what this meant. Yang Sen, aren't your guts a little too big? A skinny cultivator said with some unwillingness. With great difficulty, they found a lone cultivator with a divine fire insignia. Originally, they thought that it was an opportunity, but unexpectedly it was just bait. If it weren't for the appearance of these three people, they wouldn't have noticed the clues because of their excitement. But now that he knew what the situation was, he calmed down. Yang Sun looked at the two people. They were wearing the clothes of the god realm. He smiled and said, "Friends, since you know what's going on, you have no chance of winning. Stop here and go in another direction. After all, it's still early. There's no need for us to get into a fight." The two cultivators from the god realm furrowed their brows as well. To them, this was a matter that required careful consideration. It was just that they did not expect that the small team of three, which was originally despised by the god realm, would now have an additional bait. "The two of you should be able to deal with you, Yang Sun," another cultivator said anxiously. After all, the little girl beside Yang Sun didn't look like a powerful person. As for Xiao Yang and King Wu level 7, they weren't even worth mentioning. Immediately, Yang Sun's face changed slightly. Although he didn't want to start a fight at this time, if the other party was so uncooperative, he didn't mind making a move. "Let me give the two of you a piece of advice. If you turn around and leave now, you still have a chance. After all, the person in front is a fellow cultivator from the Heaven Sword realm. If we call him back, can the two of you still fight? Can you still continue to stay in this 10 directions, 8 wasteland map?" Xiao Yang sneered and said. When the two heard that the cultivator in front of them was from the Heaven Sword realm, their faces changed instantly. If that was the case, not to mention Xiao Yang, the other party was 3 King Wu level 8 cultivators. If they really fought, the result would be hard to say. Moreover, Xiao Yang's attitude was also very obvious. If they dared to follow, then there would definitely be a conflict, and the two of them would be forcefully eliminated. However, they were very uncomfortable with Xiao Yang's attitude. The weakest person actually dared to threaten them. Wasn't he too complacent? A fox assuming the majesty of a tiger. "What Brother Xiao said is the truth," Yang Sun echoed. Under such circumstances, gentle words were of no use. After all, in here, swords were drawn and bows were drawn, tit for tat. Hearing Yang Sun's words, and the other party's aura was also rising rapidly, the two of them looked at each other and quickly ran in the opposite direction. After all, it was really irrational to fight head-on now. Moreover, they were only a small team of 2 people. If they started fighting head-on now, the price they had to pay would be too great. In order to be able to enter the tomb of the god of sin, it was necessary to endure for a while. After all, there was still a long time, and they couldn't be anxious at this time. Seeing the two of them leave, Yang Sun also heaved a sigh of relief. Not fighting was naturally the best result. If they really fought to such an intense extent, although they could win, it was inevitable that they would have to pay a corresponding price. If there were too many battles without any progress, it would instead deplete their strength. The further they went, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. Being able to persuade them to leave with words was naturally the best result. At this moment, Li Chuanyi still didn't know that Xiao Yang and the other two were blocking the people on the side, but he felt the aura of the divine fire badge. Immediately, a trace of light appeared in Li Chuanyi's eyes. He didn't expect his luck to be so good this time. As expected, if he was a little ostentatious, he would be discovered. Of course, his exposure would also expose the other party. As long as he could gain something, it was naturally not bad. Immediately, Li Chuanyi also immediately descended. Since the fish had already taken the bait, then he naturally had to restrain himself to avoid being discovered by more people. The increasingly hot aura also made Li Chuanyi feel that the other party had more than one divine fire badge. Soon, Li Chuanyi saw the team. There were a total of 4 people, and from their clothes, he could also tell that they were cultivators from the god realm. It could be said that in this 10 directions, 8 wasteland map, there were the most cultivators from the god realm. It was very normal to be able to meet them. It might be a tough battle, but it was much better than nothing. Li Chunyi held his sword tightly in his hand, and at the same time his aura also rapidly increased as he began to plan in his heart. Chapter 1578. The other party had a total of 4 cultivators. In terms of numbers, they did not have any obvious advantage. As for who the other party was, it was also very difficult to say. As for the other party's strength, it was even more difficult to estimate. However, Li Chunyi was very confident in his own strength. In a one-on-one battle, he would not be afraid of anyone. Yang Sun's strength was also unquestionable. As long as he and Xiaoyang could quickly end the battle and help the little girl, then this matter would naturally be simple. Soon, the 4 people approached and looked at each other. When they saw that Li Chunyi was alone, the corners of their mouths revealed a proud smile. To be able to find a cultivator who was alone and had the divine fire badge, their luck was not ordinary. Swarming forward, they could easily end the battle. This was also a very safe method. Li Chunyi, I didn't expect it to be you. Looks like you Sky Sword Realm cultivators are not very united. The leader laughed disdainfully. At this time, Li Chunyi also saw the other party clearly. After discovering who the other party was, he was also a little surprised. It was actually God Realm's Zhang Xuani. He did not expect that they would meet at this time. At the same time, Li Chunyi's heart also had a trace of anticipation. Meeting this guy in this place, what kind of ending would he have? In the Jade Lake, he had humiliated Xiaoyang in order to show off. On the other hand, Xiaoyang did not pay attention to him because he was afraid of the rules of the God Realm. Here, there were not so many rules to speak of. With him being so arrogant, how would Xiaoyang retaliate? Your senior brother, Bai Jian, attacked me in the Jade Pool and embarrassed me. This debt will be on your head. Zhang Xuani gritted his teeth and said, the Jade Pool banquet was a great opportunity for him to show his face. However, because of Bai Jian's interference, he left in disgrace at the beginning. He did not even get to see Princess Mingzhu. This made him incomparably angry. It could be said that it was also something that he would never forget in his life. It was naturally impossible for him to take revenge on Bai Jian. Zhang Xuani was very clear about this. However, using a Sky Sword Realm cultivator to vent his anger didn't seem like a bad idea. Li Chunyi chuckled in disdain at these words. It really sounded like a dog barking madly. Very quickly, his gaze landed on the waists of 2 of them. The aura of the divine fire badge was emanating from there. There were a total of 2 divine fire tokens. As long as they could obtain them, Xiaoyang and Yang Sun wouldn't have to risk their lives. You can't pin this debt on me, but you should worry about yourself. There are still people in the Jade Lake banquet who have yet to settle a debt with you, Li Chunyi said with a sinister smile. Hearing this, Zhang Xuani frowned slightly. In the Jade Lake Grand Banquet, he only had a grudge with Bai Jian. He was King Wu, a rank 9 existence, and had already obtained the qualification to enter the Divine Tomb. It was impossible for him to participate in this realm of the gods' grand competition. If Bai Jian was here, then he would have an absolute advantage. How could the realm of the gods allow such a powerful person to snatch a slot and cause the realm of the gods to lose a slot? If it wasn't Bai Jian, then who was it? Are you talking about that King Wu, a rank 7 trash? He wants to settle a debt with me? Did I hear wrongly? If he's here, I'll definitely beat him up until he kneels and begs for mercy. Zhang Xuani said angrily. If it wasn't because Xiaoyang knew Bai Jian and had an extraordinary relationship with him, would Bai Jian make a move on him? In Zhang Xuani's opinion, that trash was the main culprit. If he could meet him in the 10 Directions 8 Wastelands map, then Zhang Xuani would use his cruelest method to deal with Xiaoyang. He was only a trash from the outside world. As long as he didn't break the rules and kill him, the realm of the gods would tolerate his actions. After all, a local genius and trash from the outside world couldn't be compared. Thinking up to here, Zhang Xuani's fury also grew bigger. It could even be said that the root cause of everything was Xiaoyang. If not for him, how could he possibly return in failure? Even if he was handsome, it was very possible for Princess Mingzhu to take a fancy to him. At the end of the day, it was all Xiaoyang who caused him to lose his chance. Hearing this, Li Chuanyi also smiled. "What are you smiling about?" Zhang Xuanyi asked. This kind of smile made Zhang Xuanyi feel very uncomfortable. Li Chuanyi shrugged his shoulders indifferently and said, "Nothing. I just feel that you're a little ridiculous." In Li Chuanyi's opinion, since Xiaoyang could defeat the Flowing Light World's #1 genius, Zhou Liaofei, and was also valued by senior brother, and even completed the leap rank challenge previously, that strength was not what Zhang Xuanyi could compare to. Even if the difference was not much, then it was also Xiaoyang who was stronger. These words made Zhang Xuanyi's fury flourish even more. Such mockery made him somewhat unable to tolerate it. How could he be someone that he could make fun of? Angry out of humiliation? "Your opponent today is not me," Li Chuanyi also said with a smile. After saying this, Li Chuanyi began to mutter in his heart. It had been so long. Why hadn't Xiaoyang and Yang Sun appeared yet? Ambush! Immediately, Zhang Xuanyi's eyes flashed, and he began to quickly search, wanting to know what the other cultivators of the Heaven Sword realm were doing. Very quickly, Zhang Xuanyi saw what he wanted to see. 2 men and a girl rushed over. "Xiaoyang!" Zhang Xuanyi saw clearly who came. It was De Wang's Yang Sun siblings, and that trash Xiaoyang. The current Zhang Xuanyi was also gnashing his teeth in hatred. It was this trash that caused him to lose a great opportunity. If it wasn't for him, his future would have been bright. Because he was carried back, Zhang Xuanyi's father even punished him. This kind of hatred was also nourished in his heart. It was truly a narrow road for enemies. Since he had met him now, then it was time to settle the old and new grudges together. The more he thought about it, the more excited Zhang Xuanyi became. He even couldn't suppress his emotions. When Yang Sun and Xiaoyang stood in front of Li Chuanyi and realized that their enemy this time was Zhang Xuanyi, they were slightly surprised. This was really a coincidence. He didn't expect that when they met again, it would be such a battle. "Yang Sun, you didn't follow the royal family's team and actually brought this trash," Zhang Xuanyi said angrily. He was also slightly afraid of Yang Sun. Chapter 1579. Zhang Xuanyi was only a little wary of Yang Sun, but he had 3 comrades with him. If they were to fight, Xiaoyang would be their weakness. No matter how one looked at it, they would have a greater chance of winning if they ended the battle quickly. When the other 3 saw Xiaoyang, a disdainful smile appeared on their faces. If they had encountered a team of other 4, they might have been a little wary. However, Xiaoyang was just a piece of trash. A piece of trash who had been suppressed by Zhang Xuanyi at the Jade Pool to the point that he did not even dare to breathe loudly. Xiaoyang looked at Zhang Xuanyi and shook his head helplessly. He did not expect to meet this person who had a grudge with him here. However, it was good that he had met him. Back then, he did not attack because he was not clear about the rules of the God Realm and allowed Zhang Xuanyi to humiliate him. Now that there were no rules and restrictions, it seemed like a pretty good situation to settle the score with Zhang Xuanyi. Zi Ying felt inexplicably uncomfortable when she saw this person calling Xiaoyang a piece of trash. Of course, the reason for this was because Shan Wushuang was involved. Many people thought that he had misjudged Zhang Xuanyi. "Are you guys that strong? I'm going to beat all of you down today." Zi Ying clenched her fists as she spoke. She looked furious. Zhang Xuanyi and the other 3 laughed and said, "Xiaoyang, you really are a piece of trash. Now you even need a little girl to stand up for you?" Xiaoyang's expression remained unchanged, but there was a sudden coldness in his eyes. These fellows really had the feeling that those who didn't know were fearless. "Brother Xiao, we'll leave Zhang Xuanyi to you. Leave the others to us," Li Chuanyi said, adding fuel to the fire. In Li Chuanyi's opinion, the grudge between Xiaoyang and Zhang Xuanyi had to be settled today. As for the others, they would deal with them. Hearing Li Chuni's words, the four men laughed even more happily. One of them even sneered, "Li Chuni, are you out of your mind? How could a trash like Xiao Yang be a match for Brother Zhang?" Maybe they haven't woken up yet, or maybe they were fooled by Xiao Yang's mouth. From the looks of it, the brains of Heaven's Sword realm cultivators were not that good. Even Brother Unrivaled God might have something wrong with his head, Zhang Xuani said brazenly. Immediately, a trace of coldness was emitted from Yang Sun's eyes. How could he tolerate the other party using words to attack his elder brother? For a moment, Yang Sun and his sister were ready to go. They didn't even want to talk now. They only wanted to use their fists to beat the other party to the ground. "Xiao Yang, if you're still a man, why don't we have a duel?" Zhang Xuani raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully. From Zhang Xuani's point of view, it was impossible for Xiao Yang to agree. After all, he was just a trash. How could he be a match for him? If he didn't agree, naturally he could continue to humiliate him. Xiao Yang took a step forward and said, "All right." Just as Zhang Xuani was about to mock Xiao Yang for being a coward, he was stunned. The other party's answer was a little different from what he had expected. "Haha, that trash actually agreed. Looks like he really wants to be beaten up." A cultivator laughed and said. Li Chuni thought that this answer was reasonable. After all, Xiao Yang was powerful. There was no need for him to continue enduring. Therefore, settling grudges was a logical thing to do. However, Zhang Xuani's smug look was amusing. The more smug he was now, the crueler the reality he would have to accept next. "Then let's make a deal. No one from either side is allowed to interfere in our battle," Zhang Xuani said with a chuckle. Since the other party dared to agree, Zhang Xuani would humiliate him thoroughly. He would make him beg for death. After all, with that kind of humiliation, if Yang Sun they all made a move, they would not achieve their goal. Li Chuni did not even think about it and said, "No problem." Because he had witnessed Xiao Yang's prowess, Li Chuni did not have the slightest worry either. In his view, Zhang Xuani's way of doing things was merely asking for humiliation. It was not worth thinking about at all. Yang Sun asked rather worriedly, "Your injuries?" After all, how weak Xiao Yang's aura was previously, he saw it clearly. Xiao Yang shook his head, indicating that there was no problem. Although his current injuries had not fully recovered yet and could not unleash his full strength, dealing with one Zhang Xuani was still not too much of a problem. Moreover, Xiao Yang's state was so terrible at that time. He similarly defeated the flowing light world's genius, Zhou Liaofei. Watch those three people well. Don't let them interfere. Especially that one with the divine fire token. He mustn't escape, Xiao Yang said in a low voice. When Zhang Xuani and the rest heard Xiao Yang's words, they also burst into laughter. In their view, this trash was still putting on an act until now. It was seriously laughable. Yang Sun and Li Chuni also nodded their heads very firmly. Since the other party had the divine fire token, it was naturally impossible to let him leave. After all, the most important thing now was still to preserve the advancement quota. Putting aside that they could all obtain the qualifications, 2 quotas could still fight for it. Then it's settled. Let's begin. Zhang Xuani's smile also withdrew as he advanced. Xiao Yang did not hesitate either and walked forward. Since they were going to fight, how could he possibly have the slightest bit of worry and fear? You trash made me lose a great opportunity. Today, I'll let you know what the outcome of offending me is. When the time comes, if you don't kneel down and kowtow 10,000 times, I'll definitely not let you off. Zhang Xuani rubbed his fist and shouted sternly. In Zhang Xuani's view, the other party was just a trash, but the humiliation he gave him was already a death sentence. Xiao Yang's expression became much colder. At the same time, a trace of lightning flashed in his hand, and the silver lightning spear also appeared in his hand. A lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit, not to mention that the other party's strength was not weak. Moreover, Xiao Yang's current state had not fully recovered, so he was bound to fight with all his strength. Only in this way could he win this battle without any accidents. Seeing that the other party took out a saint-level magic treasure right away, Zhang Xuani still had a look of disdain. So what if the trash had a good magic treasure? What could it change? Chapter 1580. A good show was about to begin. Both sides were looking forward to it because they knew their own people well. They knew how strong they were, so it wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with the other party. Zi Ying was also very excited at this time. She shouted, "Little brother, show him what you've got." Hearing the little girl's words, the other three laughed. This little girl was really ignorant. She was always living in her own fantasy. In this world, nothing was so simple. It was too scary to be unaware of one's own situation. Yang Sun clenched his fist. It could be said that Xiao Yang's battle was a battle to save face for him and his sister. It would let the world know that his big brother didn't misjudge him. So what if Yang Sun knew it in his heart? However, the others didn't know. Li Chuanyi was the first to enter the zone. He wanted to watch this good show. At the same time, he also stared at the other three to prevent them from attacking or escaping. "Trash, go to hell!" Zhang Xuani angrily roared. Immediately, a surge of energy surged out and turned into an extremely powerful aura that oppressed his opponent. Xiao Yang's expression didn't change at all. However, he also began to move. This time his attack was very decisive. He didn't have any intention to test his opponent's strength. Instead, he directly started to attack. 7 steps of the barbaric steps. When the first step landed, the ground suddenly shook. A majestic aura also burst out. The 7 steps of the barbaric steps could be said to be a very exquisite movement technique. In addition, Xiao Yang had also cultivated it to the limit. The reason why he used a martial skill at the beginning was very simple. Xiao Yang's current state wasn't suitable for a long battle. Therefore, it was naturally the best choice to defeat him quickly. After the first step, the majestic and heavy aura made Zhang Xuani and the others' expressions change. This didn't seem like King Wu's 7th level strength. When the second step was taken, Xiao Yang appeared in front of Zhang Xuani. The silver lightning spear in his hand directly pierced towards his opponent's chest. It was fast, accurate, and ruthless. For a moment, Zhang Xuani felt as if he could not dodge the attack. It was as if the spear was enough to pierce through his body. Seeing this scene, Li Chuanyi also thought of Zhang Hu. Because of his carelessness, he was directly crippled by Xiao Yang. Fear and shock quickly spread through Zhang Xuani's heart. He knew that it was impossible for him to dodge this spear. As for the sharpness of this saint-grade artifact, there was no need to doubt it. It was simply too easy for it to pierce through his chest. Boom! Suddenly, a huge spaceship appeared and blasted a hole in it. However, it effectively blocked Xiao Yang's attack. As a last resort, Zhang Xuani immediately summoned his flying ship to block the attack. The flying ship was also a saint-level magic treasure. Furthermore, it was forged by a top-notch master of the God Realm. Naturally, it was more than enough to block this attack. Using this opportunity, Li Chuanyi also quickly moved away and looked at Xiao Yang cautiously. This kind of aura was not King Wu's rank 7. This was an existence of rank 8. "I didn't expect a piece of trash like you to break through in such a short period of time," Zhang Xuani said angrily. He also did not expect such an outcome. However, so what if he broke through? He was still no match for him. Seeing the sudden appearance of the flying ship, Li Chuanyi shook his head helplessly. This attack still failed. If it had succeeded, then the situation would have been clear. The 3 people who came with Zhang Xuani were also slightly surprised. This time, Xiao Yang's thunderous attack was somewhat different from the rumored piece of trash. What was going on here? It must be that Zhang Xuani was careless and gave him a chance. As long as he fought seriously, Xiao Yang would still be no match for him. Xiao Yang looked at the flying ship above Zhang Xuani's head and the corner of his mouth slightly raised. With a thought, His flying ship also suddenly appeared and directly charged towards Zhang Xuani. Everyone had their own flying ship. Thus, if they collided together, they would not be able to do anything. Seeing this, Zhang Xuani complained incessantly in his heart. This guy was really crazy. In the next moment, Zhang Xuani also let out a low roar and split his attention to control the flying ship to collide. Then, it would depend on whose strength and control was more exquisite. Seeing the two flying ships colliding, everyone immediately felt a little heartache. This kind of battle was completely a competition of wealth. Of course, the battle between the two could not be resolved just like this. A golden light flashed and a golden spear appeared in Zhang Xuani's hand. If it was a competition of spear skills, Zhang Xuani had received training from the army of the God Realm. His spear skills were naturally superb. Even if you broke through, the result is still unchangeable. Zhang Xuani roared angrily. In the next moment, the golden spear in Zhang Xuani's hand danced. For a moment, golden light flashed and rushed toward Xiaoyang. Yang Sun saw clearly that this was a spear skill unique to the God Realm. Moreover, the martial skills grade was also very high. However, Xiaoyang did not see the slightest bit of nervousness. His 7 steps barbaric steps had not ended yet. He danced with the silver lightning spear and, at the same time, rapidly changed his position, making it impossible for Zhang Xuani to catch him. At the same time, because every step of the 7 steps barbaric steps would cause a huge shock wave, it also affected Zhang Xuani a little. The more they fought, the more shocked Zhang Xuani was. How could this trash's strength be so rich? In fact, it was even better than him. What Zhang Xuani did not know was that Xiaoyang was a double King Wu 8th level existence. Whether it was the realm or the body, they both belonged to the same realm. It was very normal for Xiaoyang's strength to be much higher than his. However, Zhang Xuani was still a genius of the God Realm after all. He killed his way up and obtained a quota. Naturally, his strength was not ordinary. Very soon, he gradually calmed down his disadvantage. However, every time he attacked, he was extremely powerful. Golden light flashed, and his spear skills were dazzling. The golden light and the lightning constantly intertwined. Every time they collided, there would be a huge explosion. The more they fought, the more Zhang Xuani was alarmed. This kind of direct battle allowed him to understand how terrifying his opponent was. He was already going all out, but now it was only a draw. How terrifying was Xiaoyang's strength? Back then in the Jade Lake, wasn't he a trash who was humiliated by him to the point that he did not even dare to breathe? Why was he so strong now? Chapter 1581. For a moment, Zhang Xuani's heart was also incomparably shocked, because the Xiaoyang he met now and the Xiaoyang he met before were almost 2 different people. Could it be that in this short period of time he had already completed his transformation? Even the 3 people who were watching the battle were extremely shocked. Ever since the Jade Pool feast, Xiaoyang's reputation could be described as plummeting. Almost the entire realm of the gods felt that Xiaoyang was just a good-for-nothing. However, the strength that he had displayed now was not the case. Although Zhang Xuani was a little shocked, he quickly calmed down. Therefore, in his opinion, it was not that he had no chance of winning this battle. After all, Xiaoyang had just broken through to rank 8 King Wu. His foundation was definitely not as stable as Zhang Xuani's. As long as Zhang Xuani stabilized his state of mind and advanced step by step, wouldn't it be very easy to defeat his opponent? However, Xiaoyang was not prepared to give Zhang Xuani any more time. This was because the intense circulation of spiritual energy made Xiaoyang feel a little strange. Although his consciousness had stabilized, it was still a little strenuous under the great battle. The slight dizziness also made Xiaoyang realize that it was better to end this battle as soon as possible. After all, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. Even with Li Chuanyi and Yang Sun holding the line, any accident could happen in this 10 directions, 8 wasteland map. Therefore, he naturally had to be more cautious and could not afford to make too big of a mistake. After all, Sometimes, even a small detail could bury the root of the failure in the future. The 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map was like a wrestling ring. The probability of encountering an enemy was too high. The silver lightning spear seemed to have sensed its owner's thoughts and immediately flashed with lightning. Streaks of lightning also rose and fell one after another like water snakes that were constantly swimming. Seeing the scene, Zhang Xuani could not help but hold his breath. His eyes even emitted a trace of vigor. This pressing aura also allowed him to feel the change in the situation. Xiaoyang would most likely go all out next. The intense pressure made him realize that the guesses in his heart were probably wrong. In the next moment, Xiaoyang used the 7 steps of the barbaric steps again. He knew very well that there was no point in dragging this out any longer. Ending the battle now was the best choice. As the saying goes, a long night is fraught with dreams. Who knows what kind of changes might occur in the next moment? For a moment, the power of lightning surged out from the long spear. Even the air contained a violent power which was restless. Zhang Xuani's face immediately turned ghastly pale. However, he was a cultivator who had experienced hundreds of battles, so he did not panic. He calmed down as quickly as he could and gathered his strength, preparing to counterattack. The pride in Zhang Xuani's heart would not allow him to be defeated here. On the contrary, the strength that Xiaoyang displayed made him a little excited in his heart. He couldn't wait to use all his strength to deal with him. He didn't want to lose. In an instant, the long spear in Xiaoyang's hand arrived. Zhang Xuani did not dare to hesitate and waved the golden spear in his hand at the same time. Suddenly, when the 2 spears collided, a sonorous sound was heard. A huge rebounding force caused Zhang Xuani's hands to tremble slightly. He had never imagined that Xiaoyang's strength would be so strong. Even he could not withstand it. Now, there was not much time left for Zhang Xuani to think about how to deal with the enemy, because Xiaoyang's attack had arrived again. The incomparably fierce attack was like a storm. It did not stop at all and continued to pour down. Zhang Xuani's strength wasn't weak either. He was even more familiar with the tempering of his martial skills. Although he seemed to be barely resisting, his defense was flawless, and he didn't let Xiaoyang gain too much of an advantage. The side that originally thought that victory was in their hands began to feel a little surprised and panicked. Everything that was happening in front of them made them feel that it was too unreal. Is Zhang Xuani's condition not good because of the previous battle? I think so. He was actually suppressed by Xiaoyang. That's impossible. How is it possible that he didn't suffer any damage when fighting with those geniuses? The 3 of them were also discussing. At the same time, they were also looking for excuses to convince themselves that everything that was happening now was not because of Xiaoyang's strength, but because Zhang Xuani's condition was not very good after a series of battles. That was why it was like this. Hearing the other party's words, Li Chuni laughed disdainfully. Sometimes the arrogance of the people in the divine realm was really ridiculous. They were not willing to admit that the other party was strong, and would only look for all kinds of excuses. If it were not for the divine realm's unique resources, would these people be able to reach where they were today with such a mentality? Zi Ying also nodded in satisfaction. She felt that her underling was still very strong. Now, it seemed that it was not that embarrassing. However, Yang Sun's view was different. Because he had fought with Xiaoyang before, he knew that he was a very steady person. But now, every time he made a move, he was very anxious. There was a feeling that he wanted to quickly determine the outcome of the battle. Why was that? Immediately, Yang Sun thought of the previous incident where Xiaoyang was injured. Perhaps it was because of this that he chose to quickly end the battle. At this moment, Zhang Xuani was also very irritated. Being chased and attacked by the other party like this, he really could not stand it in his heart. It was just that every time he prepared a counterattack, it was as if the other party was aware of it. Every time, the other party could accurately break through his defenses without being able to accumulate power. Such a valiant strength did not seem like a person who had just stepped into the 8th level of King Wu. It could be said that there were too many questions in Zhang Xuani's heart at this moment. At the same time, he could not get a good answer. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Zhang Xuani thought so in his heart. He was extremely helpless, and at the same time, he was also very unwilling. Now he was also racking his brains to think of a way to break this stalemate. Otherwise, if he revealed a slight flaw, then he would definitely be defeated. However, when Zhang Xuani thought of this point, he had already fallen into a state of failure. At this moment, the last step of the 7 steps of the barbaric steps was taken, causing the earth to shake and the mountains to shake. Chapter 1582. A huge shockwave swept out, causing Zhang Xuani's body to shake uncontrollably. The spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been scattered by the shockwave. It was intermittent and could not be gathered together at all. Although it was only for a split second, a fight between experts usually happened in a split second. Chi! The silver lightning spear pierced into Zhang Xuani's shoulder, causing the violent power of the lightning to explode. It could be said that Xiaoyang was repeating the same trick. As he could not kill, he could only control the direction of his attack. As long as he could make Zhang Xuani lose his ability to fight, it would be enough. Destroying Zhang Xuani's shoulder blade was the safest way. However, Zhang Xuani was, after all, an 8th order martial king. Moreover, he had killed his way up to this level. His combat experience was also very rich. He immediately retreated. The power of the lightning was not enough to shatter his shoulder blade. However, there was still some residual power causing a hole to appear in his shoulder. Blood splattered everywhere. Seeing this, Xiaoyang immediately stood up and raised his hand to slap Zhang Xuani. Slap! This slap was incomparably loud, like a sudden clap of thunder on the ground, causing everyone to be stunned on the spot. Wasn't this method a bit too much? Moreover, it did not seem to be of much help to victory. Zhang Xuani was instantly sent flying. Although it looked like a simple slap, Xiaoyang was a rank 8 King Wu. How powerful was he? Moreover, the brain was a more fragile part. In an instant, Zhang Xuani's vision turned black. He was completely stunned because he could not react at all. What was going on? How did he get slapped like this? That slap could be said to have caused the sky and earth to spin around. In fact, some things even shattered directly. Not sure if it was his teeth or his incomparably arrogant self-esteem. It seemed that Xiaoyang wasn't going to stop here. How could he vent the humiliation he had suffered in the Jade Lake so easily? One of Zhang Xuani's friends saw that Xiaoyang didn't intend to stop and immediately became furious. His body flashed, and he prepared to attack Xiaoyang. However, just as that person moved his body, a huge mountain suddenly appeared above his head and directly pressed down on him. Mount Tianqin was a Saint-tier magic treasure. Coupled with the fact that Xiaoyang had used his full strength, the person was caught off guard and was directly suppressed to the ground. When the other person saw this, he immediately made a move, but what greeted him was a flying ship that directly flew over. Both of them were Saint-level magic treasures. It was still possible for them to stall him for a while. Moreover, what Xiaoyang needed was not a lot of time. When Li Chuanyi saw this, he immediately scolded, "Shameless!" Clang! With a sound, his sword was immediately unsheathed at this moment and flew directly towards the last cultivator, who was about to make a move. When Ziying saw that the other party broke the rules first, she immediately rolled up her sleeves and rushed over. "You were the one who was unreasonable first. Don't blame me for not following the rules," Ziying said angrily and also blasted a punch. Yang Sun on the side looked around and didn't find anything unexpected. He also quickly made a move. Since the one-on-one fight had evolved into a team battle, there was naturally no need to stand by and watch. Not to mention other things. Since Xiaoyang wanted to vent his anger now, they naturally had to do their best to cover him. Moreover, they had to entangle these people so that they couldn't leave here with the divine fire token. It could be said that with Zhang Xuani's initial defeat, this battle was already over. The people present were not stupid. They knew the principle of beating a drowning dog. Moreover, the other party's morale would be low because of Zhang Xuani's failure. Now was also a good opportunity to make a move and kill them all. Slap. Another slap landed on Zhang Xuani's face. Zhang Xuani was completely dumbfounded as he fell to the ground. Xiao Yang held the silver lightning spear upside down and walked over slowly with a cold smile on his face. Zhang Xuani was lying on the ground in a daze. The two slaps had already caused his spirit to tremble. He was in a trance and didn't know what had happened at all. Immediately after, Xiao Yang didn't show any mercy and directly swung the spear in his hand. Ah! Zhang Xuani let out a blood-curdling scream and instantly regained consciousness. He wanted to counterattack, but his other shoulder blade had also exploded, causing the spiritual energy he had gathered to disappear without a trace. Now that Zhang Xuani's combat power was completely destroyed, Xiao Yang was relieved. It was finally over. Immediately after, Xiao Yang bent down and took the divine fire token from Zhang Xuani's waist. He sneered and said, "You kept calling me trash. Then what are you now?" As soon as these words came out, Zhang Xuani immediately frowned. His face was also very ugly. He never thought that he would be defeated by Xiao Yang. Moreover, it was an extremely humiliating defeat. The two slaps were like branding iron in the depths of his soul. He would probably never be able to get rid of it in this lifetime. Zhang Xuani looked at Xiao Yang with incomparable resentment. Although it was very difficult for him to gather spiritual power, he was still unconvinced. He wanted to fight. He wanted to trample Xiao Yang under his feet. However, just as Zhang Xuani propped himself up, he felt a huge force hit his back, and his whole body fell to the ground again. Let me give you a piece of advice. In order to avoid more pain, you should take your friend and leave the 10-sided 8 wasteland map. Otherwise, I don't mind breaking your leg tendons again. Xiao Yang said in a very cold tone. Defeating Zhang Xuani was almost not worth mentioning for Xiao Yang. There was nothing to show off. What's more, this assessment wasn't for him to vent his emotions. Therefore, there was no need to be too calculative. Zhang Xuani originally wanted to refute, but he found that he could not move at all. His heart was also filled with despair. Could it be that he was really in a desperate situation, and now he had to end this journey in such a humiliating way? The more he thought about it, the more the anger in Zhang Xuani's heart burned. It could be said that he was anxious and anxious. No matter who it was, it would be difficult for them to accept being defeated by someone they looked down on. Moreover, Zhang Xuani was from the God realm. He was too arrogant and complacent. Chapter 1583. At this very moment, Zhang Xuani's heart had completely collapsed because he had never expected such a thing to happen. He had lost. He was from the divine world, the strongest world among the 3,000 small worlds. He had fought his way up level by level and was extremely powerful. How could he lose to a piece of trash? All of this was definitely not real. It must be a dream. Even if it was a dream, it still felt bizarre and strange. This was simply too illogical. What was going on here? Sizzle. However, the pain on his body continued to spread. This made Zhang Xuani very clear in his heart that this was real. He had really lost. It was as if all of his pride had shattered, like a mirror at this very moment. It was a scene of devastation that was too horrible to look at. The cold wind was blowing and it was bone-chilling. If you don't want to end up like Zhang Xuani, hand over the Divine Fire Badge and leave the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map. Then I will let you go. If not, I don't mind going through the trouble of severely injuring you before throwing you out. Xiao Yang's voice was incomparably cold. When these words were spoken, the three of them were already suppressed by their respective opponents and did not have much strength to retaliate. Defeat was only a matter of time. Thus they consciously stopped. However, they were still unwilling to withdraw from this test. However, Even if they continued to fight, their opponents would have an absolute advantage and they would not be able to match up to them. In the end, they would probably be eliminated and would even be covered with injuries. When they saw Zhang Xuani's miserable appearance, they instantly felt a chill in their hearts. This guy was a little too merciless and ruthless. However, in a battle, if one showed mercy to the enemy, it would be cruel to one's own self. As long as one was not a greenhorn, one would not do such a thing. The current situation was very clear. There was simply no way to turn the tables. The other person who had the divine fire badge could only grit his teeth and hand it over to Yang Sun. Seeing that the situation was settled and that he had obtained what he wanted, Xiaoyang also took a few steps back and said, "Take him and leave." Xiaoyang's gaze also locked onto the three of them. At the same time, the silver lightning spear in his hand did not extinguish the lightning energy. He would not let his guard down until his opponents had completely left. The three of them sighed helplessly when they saw this. Soon after, they walked over and helped Zhang Xuani up. Originally, they thought that meeting Xiaoyang would be a free gift of the Divine Flame Badge. But who would have thought that things would end up like this? Not only did he fail to obtain an additional spot for promotion, he even lost the qualification to continue the assessment. They had thought about launching another counterattack, but when they saw Xiaoyang wielding the silver lightning spear with the Zither Mountain and the flying ship behind him, they had no choice but to give up on that idea. After all, the other party didn't have the slightest intention of letting down their guard. Even if they continued to fight, they would probably end up in a miserable state. If they left now, they could at least leave with some dignity. Even though they were filled with endless regret, the three of them could only support Zhang Xuani and quickly leave the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map. Seeing the 4 of them leave, Xiaoyang also let out a sigh of relief. He put away all his magic artifacts and lay on the ground limply. Controlling so many magic artifacts in a short period of time, coupled with the intense battle, had caused his sea of consciousness to become slightly turbulent again. He needed to rest to recover from the injuries. Yang Sun and the other 2 had gained quite a lot, but before they could rejoice, they saw Xiaoyang collapse on the ground. Immediately, their mood became extremely gloomy. Although Xiaoyang had acted very domineering earlier, they already knew that he was only putting up a strong front when they saw his current state. Li Chunyi, on the other hand, smiled in admiration. Xiaoyang was truly a madman. In such a terrible situation, he was still able to defeat his opponent with lightning-fast methods. Furthermore, he was still able to hold on, and his opponent was completely unaware of it. This kind of perseverance was just too hard to come by. It was no wonder that Senior Brother Bai Jian admired him so much. All of this was not without reason. Perhaps this was the common point between those top monsters. They all had shining points between each other and were attracted to each other. Are your injuries okay? Can you still hold on? Yang Sun also asked somewhat worriedly. After all, they still had a few days to fight, and every battle they faced would only become more intense and cruel. However, Xiaoyang's state was really terrible now. Moreover, they now had 3 divine fire badges. When the time came, the range of their exposure would become larger and larger, and they would face more and more enemies. However, under such circumstances, they could not help but be worried. It's okay. I only need 2 or 3 days to recover. Xiaoyang also smiled bitterly helplessly. Xiaoyang still underestimated the power of the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map's owner. Even though he had taken many medicinal pills to nourish his injuries, it still could not completely solve the problem. Moreover, the hidden injuries were also more serious, and the temporary recovery was only on the surface. If they were to really engage in an intense battle, many problems would naturally be exposed. 2 or 3 days is not very long. During this period of time, we can just relax and recuperate. Yang Sun said. From Yang Sun's point of view, they had already obtained 2 divine fire badges. As long as they could keep 2 spots, it would be good enough. After all, after entering the second round of assessment, Yang Sin had already prepared for the worst. To be able to have such a harvest was already an unexpected surprise. Little brother, I did not expect you to be so powerful. You did not disappoint me. Ziying also said with a smile. Moreover, she even took out a few bottles of medicinal pills. Looking at those medicinal pills, Xiao Yang's heart was filled with gratitude. However, at the same time, he was also very helpless. The medicinal pills from the realm of gods might have extraordinary effects. However, what he suffered was not external injuries, but injuries to his soul. You don't have to be polite with me. Ziying saw that Xiaoyang was indifferent, so she shook her head and said. When Xiaoyang heard that, he said, Thank you, big sister. In order to not arouse the suspicion of the three of them, Xiaoyang still took the medicinal pills even though they did not have much effect. Immediately, Xiaoyang also felt a very comfortable feeling spreading throughout his body. The pure medicinal power nourished his tendons and meridians. More people are coming. Be alert. Xiaoyang suddenly opened his eyes and said solemnly, Chapter 1584. Immediately, the other three were also on alert. Although they were not injured in the previous battle, they had consumed a lot of energy. Moreover, Xiaoyang's current situation did not seem to be suitable to continue fighting. They did not know how many people came. If it was a small team, they were still very confident that they could compete with them. If there were more people, they would probably fall into a bitter battle. At that time, everything would be a bit mysterious. Because of the benefits, many people knew in their hearts that only by sticking together could they stabilize their gains. Moreover, some forces were even more clear that sometimes not everyone was required to enter the divine tomb. It was enough for the core to go. Of course, if they could snatch a few more places, why not? At this moment, Xiaoyang was also very helpless because the damage to his sea of consciousness was really serious after being hit by the owner of the 10 Directions 8 Wasteland map. The fierce battle was too strenuous. Even though the situation had stabilized, it was still difficult to fight with all his strength. It was also because of this that Xiaoyang had been so low-key in the past few days and did not take the initiative to attack. When he originally thought that he could, he encountered Zhang Xuani, but it still seemed a little strenuous in the battle. After a while, Xiaoyang and the others saw 2 cultivators flying over on their swords. They looked at the 4 people indifferently, and the expression in their eyes was also very complicated. For a moment, Li Chuni's eyes revealed a hint of joy, because the people who came were from his sky, sword territory. As for the other 2 people, their eyes were very complicated because they saw 3 divine fire tokens. If they could snatch them, then their small team of 3 people from sky, sword territory could all advance. Senior brother Zhao, senior brother Qin. Li Chuni also cupped his hands and bowed. When Xiaoyang and Yang Sun heard this, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Since they were friends, there was nothing to worry about. Of course, they were not completely unprepared. After all, they had fought side by side with Li Chuni, but the other 2 did not. Junior brotherly, where did you go? We have been looking for you these days. Zhao Qizhu asked with a smile. Qin Feng also smiled and nodded. He said, I thought that you had been eliminated. If it wasn't for Brother Zhao's righteous intervention, I'm afraid I would have been eliminated. Because I saw the divine fire badges after the battle, I went to snatch them. That's why I didn't go to the rendezvous point. Li Chuni sighed helplessly. If his 2 senior brothers were present at that time, how could he be chased and beaten by the cultivators of Flowing Light World? Hearing Li Chuni's words, Zhao Qizhu and Qin Feng looked at Xiaoyang with a trace of astonishment. Of course, they didn't have an answer for this person. Previously, Bai Jian had boasted a lot about Xiaoyang. However, at the Jade Lake banquet, his weakness made many people question his strength. It could even be said that the 2 of them were now even more confused about Xiaoyang's strength. However, in their hearts, they knew very well that if it was 3 against 3, they still had a chance to win. Yang Sun looked at the strange attitude of the two and laughed disdainfully because he knew that the other party probably wanted to snatch the divine fire badges. Xiaoyang also saw the clues, so he cupped his hands and said, "Brotherly, since your senior brothers are here, you should go with them." In these days of contact, Li Chunyi was also a good person. If he really turned hostile, it would be very difficult for him to be sandwiched in the middle. Therefore, parting ways now seemed to be the best choice, so as to avoid a big fight and hurt the harmony. Li Chunyi still didn't know what his senior brother was thinking, but in the face of Xiao Yang's eviction order, he felt a little reluctant and helpless. "But Brother Xiao, your injuries have not healed. If I leave now, I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to guard the divine fire badges," Li Chunyi said with some worry. When these words came out, Xiaoyang was also very helpless in his heart. This Li Chunyi was really simple. Even now, he still didn't see the current situation clearly. However, he couldn't be blamed. After all, Li Chunyi had good intentions. Immediately after Zhao Qizhu and Qin Feng heard this news, they looked at each other and smiled. They understood each other's intentions. Since Xiaoyang was heavily injured, the only ones who could help were Yang Sun and the little girl. 3 against 2, no matter how one looked at it. Victory was in their grasp. Xiaoyang waved his hand indifferently and said, "It's okay. Yang Sun and Zi Ying can protect me." "Little brother, you actually dare to call this lady by her name. Do you want to be beaten?" Zi Ying said in a bad tone. Immediately, Xiaoyang also began to apologize. It was better to go along with such a little ancestor's temper. Looking at Xiaoyang's begging appearance, Zhao Qizhu and Qin Feng felt that this version of the rumor that spread in the Jade Pool might be more realistic. How could such a weak Xiaoyang be their opponent? Li Chunyi was used to it and didn't find it strange. He knew very well that Xiaoyang just loved this little girl, so he went along with her. "Junior brotherly, you have the divine fire token, but we don't," Zhao Qizhu also said with a smile at this time. As soon as these words came out, the power in Yang Sun's body also quickly mobilized because he knew very well that the other party really wanted to fight. Therefore, he had to be careful. It seemed that Li Chunyi didn't understand the meaning behind it and said, "Two senior brothers, don't worry. With the 3 of us working together, are you afraid that we won't be able to get the divine fire token?" Zi Ying covered her eyes with one hand. She felt that although Li Chunyi's strength wasn't bad, his brain didn't seem to be working well. Even a little girl could see the situation, but he didn't. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on Li Chunyi. He understood both sides and didn't think about the problem of selfishness. That's right. However, in order to avoid any undue delay, we should seize the divine fire tablet now and find a good place to guard it. Once the time is up, we can advance to the next level. Wouldn't that be perfect? Zhao Qizhu's smile grew even wider. At this time, Li Chunyi finally understood the meaning behind it, and his expression changed dramatically. His 2 senior brothers were actually coveting the divine fire token in Xiaoyang's hands. If the 2 sides really went to war, then what would he do? Chapter 1585. The current change made Li Chunyi very sad. He never thought that his senior brother would be thinking about how to snatch the divine fire insignia from Xiaoyang's hands. On one side was his sect, and on the other side were his friends who had gone through thick and thin together. It seemed that no matter what choice he made, he would offend the other side. Therefore, as the middleman and the weight in the balance, no matter what decision he made, it would lead to the other side becoming stronger. On the other hand, the other party would become enemies because of his choice. For a moment, Li Chunyi felt as if the world was falling apart. This assessment was related to entering the divine tomb, so it was a very serious matter. No matter what choice he made, it was difficult to satisfy both sides. It could be said that the most aggrieved person was Li Chunyi. "Senior brother, do we really have to do this?" Li Chunyi asked unwillingly. It could be said that Li Chunyi's heart was in great pain and he was constantly struggling. He did not want to see both sides fight, but it seemed that this was not a problem for him. When Zhao Qizhu heard his junior brother say such childish words, he also felt that it was a little funny, and even laughed. What should be done now? Was it not obvious? Of course. This way, the three of us can safely advance. Zhao Qizhu said with certainty. In Zhao Qizhu's view, this was a heaven-sent opportunity. If they missed this opportunity, it would be very difficult and strenuous to obtain the divine fire insignia in the future. Therefore, since there were such conditions and opportunities to solve this problem, why wouldn't he do it? Hurry up and get lost, or this lady will beat you all down. Ziying also raised her small fist and said angrily, if they really wanted to fight, Ziying would not be afraid of them. As for compromising, this was not something a little girl would do. Moreover, Ziying also had her own pride. Other than that person in the god realm, she was not afraid of anyone. Looking at the little girl's angry appearance, Zhao Qizhu and Qin Feng felt that it was a little funny. Could it be that this little girl could overturn the heavens? Xiao Yang helplessly shook his head because he knew very well that Li Chunyi was the most difficult person to deal with now. He was such a pure child. Coupled with his upright and plain-spoken personality, he was probably in a lot of pain right now. Senior Marshal Brother, if you really want to do this, I have nothing to say. However, I will not participate in this battle, Li Chunyi said firmly. To Li Chunyi, it didn't matter which side he was going to help against the other. This was unacceptable. After all, both parties were related to each other. It was impossible to harm either party for the sake of benefits. Therefore, the only thing he could do was to not help either side. Zhao Qizhu laughed disdainfully and said, as long as you don't forget your position and help them, it's fine. In Zhao Qizhu's view, dealing with Yang Sun and a little girl, as well as the weak and seriously injured Xiaoyang, was something that the two of them could easily accomplish. Therefore, there was no suspense in this battle. On the other hand, Qin Feng's expression changed because he also felt his junior brother's embarrassment. Things had escalated to such an extent because of personal interests. Indeed, he was somewhat unable to bear it. However, in order to go to the divine tomb, sometimes he had to be ruthless. After all, such an opportunity was rare. If they missed it, they might regret it for the rest of their lives. This was also a chance to soar to the sky, a great opportunity to make their future infinitely bright. Brother Xiao, this divine fire badge was originally guarded by you. Now, it should be returned to its rightful owner. Li Chunyi handed over the divine fire badge in his hand and said sincerely. Xiao Yang looked at the divine fire badge and didn't accept it. He just smiled and shook his head. On the other hand, Zhao Qizhu and the others saw this scene and gnashed their teeth in hatred. How could they hand over their own rights? What kind of bewitching potion did Xiao Yang feed Li Chunyi to make him so loyal? This was really puzzling. He could even give up his own benefits. Could it be that this guy's brain was injured and he became an idiot? I said that this divine fire badge originally belonged to you, Xiao Yang said indifferently. Ziying also said angrily, what are you doing? Put it away. Seeing everyone's attitude, Li Chunyi couldn't help but laugh at himself. His friends, who had only been with him for a few days, were all thinking for him. On the other hand, his senior brothers, who had been with him day and night, didn't understand his state of mind. Li Chunyi, who was filled with emotions, shook his head and threw the divine fire badge in his hand to Zhao Qizhu. He said coldly, senior brothers, I'll give you my divine fire badge. Zhao Qizhu took the divine fire badge and revealed a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Of course, this matter wouldn't end just like that. However, just as Zhao Qizhu was about to say something, Li Chunyi spoke first. He cupped his hands towards Xiao Yang's group and said, Friends, let's meet again after the examination. For now, we'll part ways here. With that, Li Chunyi shouted, and the sword in his hand clanged loudly. He stepped on the sword and directly turned into a sword ray that disappeared from everyone's sight. Suddenly, Zhao Qizhu was extremely shocked. They had finally met up with great difficulty, But now Li Chuanyi had actually left just like that. What did he mean by doing this? This point made Zhao Qizhu and Qin Feng unable to understand. Could it be that this guy's brain was damaged? Would it be possible for him to win this round of assessment by himself? Was he going to give up his chance to advance just like that? Xiao Yang shook his head helplessly. Li Chuanyi's choice could be said to be very helpless. He didn't want to offend either side, but the situation had already progressed to this point. It was simply impossible to reconcile. Therefore, it was understandable for him to make such a choice. However, Li Chuanyi's path to advance had become much narrower and more difficult. It could be said that Li Chuanyi was just fighting for his own personal feelings. He was relying on his personal feelings to travel the world. Although he was a little hot-headed, it was very comfortable to befriend such a person. There was no need to worry about being stabbed in the back. He was very similar to Bai Jian in this aspect. Although Zhao Qizhu was a little moved, he thought about it again. As long as he obtained the divine fire badge and found Li Chuanyi, this matter would naturally be resolved. It could be said that it was also because of Xiao Yang that the relationship between them had become distant. It was all Xiao Yang's fault. Chapter 1586. In Zhao Qizhu's view, all of this was caused by Xiao Yang. Otherwise, how could there be estrangement between the two of them, who were originally very close to each other now? It could be said that Xiao Yang was the main culprit. For a time, Zhao Qizhu's aura also suddenly erupted, and a very powerful sword intent was not restrained in the slightest. Now he was completely in a state of rage. He wanted to kill Xiao Yang to vent the hatred in his heart. Seeing this, Qin Feng did not dare to hesitate in the slightest. Holding the sword in his hand, a strong battle intent also erupted. Since they were going to fight, then any more words would be nonsense. What's more, the battle here also needed to be ended quickly to avoid any undue delay. The sword intent that erupted from these two people standing together could be said to be very strong. The sharp aura made people feel a strong sense of urgency. Even around them, sword scars constantly appeared. It could be seen how tyrannical their aura was. Yang Sen and Zi Ying also adjusted their state to the best at the same time, and they also prepared to take out their special skills to prepare for the battle. After all, the other party was a sky sword realm cultivator, and they were good at attacking. If they wanted to compete with the other party, it would be a little difficult. As for defending against their attacks, it was simply a difficult thing to do. Therefore, the only way to go was to defeat them. The atmosphere could be said to have changed because of the tit-for-tat between the four people. It was very tense and subtle, and a great battle was about to erupt. Everyone was highly focused. After all, in such a situation, the slightest carelessness would lead to eternal damnation. They were all geniuses from various places, and they were all top geniuses. Whether it was strength or combat experience, they were very powerful and rich. If they were underestimated, they would inevitably pay a very heavy price. Xiao Yang, on the other hand, stood there without saying a word, but his heart was filled with rage. Of course, all of this was because of Li Chuanyi's departure. A very pure person was forced to face danger alone, and he did not know what would happen in the future. In an instant, traces of lightning energy appeared on Xiao Yang's body. A huge force erupted at this moment. In the blink of an eye, the silver lightning spear appeared and shot towards Zhao Qizhu like a bolt of lightning. The silver lightning spear looked like a flash of lightning. Due to its fury, its strength was greatly enhanced. As such, the power contained within was extremely powerful. It was as if it possessed an unparalleled power. Zhao Qizhu looked on with a hint of disdain in his eyes. With a thought, a defensive sword chi appeared. But in the next moment, his eyes were filled with disbelief. That was because the sword chi shattered in an instant. It was unable to resist at all. How was it possible for Xiao Yang, who was heavily injured, to release such a powerful and pure energy? For a moment, Zhao Qizhu's heart was shaken. what had happened was even more difficult for him to accept. The chill in his heart made him even more fearful. This spear seemed to be able to obliterate him directly. He wanted to dodge, but he had been completely locked on. There was no way to avoid it. Could it be that he was going to die just like that? Suddenly, the silver lightning thunder spear stopped 3 inches away from Zhao Qiju's forehead. However, the power of thunder and lightning emitted from the spear made his scalp tingle and cold sweat trickle down his back. For by Jian's sake, I won't cripple the 2 of you this time. Hurry up and get lost. Don't let me see you again. Otherwise, don't even think about staying in this 10 directions, 8 wastelands map. Xiao Yang's voice became extremely cold at this moment. Qin Feng, who was watching from the side, was also frightened. This kind of power control could be said to be very ingenious. If it was not controlled well, Zhao Qiju might even die directly. Wasn't Xiaoyang said to be a weak waste? The immense power that had erupted out did not seem to be the case at all. Zhao Qiju was also frightened because what had happened just now had almost taken his life. Although he was also disdainful and careless, the threat that he was facing now was very real. Suddenly, Zhao Qiju also realized that the number 1 genius of the Sky Sword realm, Bai Jian, who was bragging about someone, was not someone who could be achieved with just flowery words. Without true strength, how could those monstrous geniuses appreciate each other? In this way, many questions were answered. In the jade pool, Xiaoyang was probably deliberately showing weakness. In the next moment, Zhao Qiju also laughed. He laughed very helplessly. This was because he felt that he was quite ridiculous. According to the rumors, he thought that Xiaoyang was easy to bully. Now it seemed that the rumors were just rumors. I understand. Zhao Qiju replied in despair. Xiaoyang was able to erupt with such powerful strength in a seriously injured state. If Yang Sun was added, the 2 of them really had no chance of winning. Immediately, Xiaoyang waved his hand, and the silver lightning spear returned to his hand. However, his expression was still incomparably cold. It could only be said that Zhao Qiju's approach had made Xiaoyang very angry. Otherwise, he would not have made such a move and directly made Zhao Qiju despair. Zhao Qiju did not even dare to have the slightest thought of resisting. Qin Feng also laughed bitterly. They had failed before they even made a move. It could even be said that they had suffered a crushing defeat. The corners of Yang Sun's mouth twitched constantly. This Xiaoyang was really too decisive. Moreover, the murderous aura that he had just displayed was simply not in line with common sense. It could be said that this time, Yang Sun's view of Xiaoyang had also undergone a huge change. Such a strong murderous aura could not be displayed casually. It had to be said that if one was not decisive in killing and experienced too much, one would not be able to cultivate it at all. What had Xiaoyang experienced before? Now that he thought about it, it was a little difficult to figure out. The aura just now made Ziying feel a little scared. That seemingly submissive little brother of hers had acted like a demon just now. It was frightening. After seeing the 2 people leave, Xiaoyang also exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He leaned on the long spear and barely stabilized his body. The full blow just now had also caused a sea of consciousness to become turbulent again. Chapter 1587. Yang Sun sighed helplessly inside when he saw how shaky Xiaoyang was. Originally, he and Ziying had come to protect Xiaoyang. Who would have thought that Xiaoyang would be the one to stop all the battles in the end? They felt like they had won without doing anything. Are you all right? Yang Sun asked worriedly. Naturally, he could tell with a single glance whether Xiaoyang was all right or not. The answer that Yang Sun wanted to know was very obvious. He wanted to know whether Xiaoyang could continue in his current state. After all, his current state and the strength that he had displayed were indeed unfathomable. Ziying also stood there obediently without saying a word. Who knew if she was frightened by the powerful aura that Xiaoyang had erupted with earlier? At this moment, Xiao Yang's condition could be said to be very bad. Dizziness was the least of it. Now that his sea of consciousness was in turmoil, the energy in his body was also affected. It was somewhat rioting, attacking his internal organs and veins. Fortunately, he was supported by a powerful medicinal effect, which was why he was barely able to hold on without collapsing to the ground. It's not a big problem. It's just that I won't have to fight in the next few days if I can. Otherwise, it'll be difficult for me to use my full strength on the final day if I continue like this, Xiaoyang replied honestly. After all, no matter how good the start was, the situation would become extremely terrible if they dropped the ball at the end. After all their efforts were for the sake of successfully advancing with the Divine Fire Badge on the final day. That was how the rules were set. You had to follow them. It could be said that it was also because of the rules that everyone had to calculate every step carefully. If something went wrong at any point, they would probably fail in the end. Whether they could defend the Divine Fire Badge on the final day could be said to be the most important step. However, things weren't as simple as imagined because the last day would be the final madness. No one knew what kind of changes would happen on the last day. Yang Xin smiled indifferently and said, "Then we'll try our best to avoid fighting during this period of time. After all, it's still early, and I presume those people won't dare to go all out." Although that was the case, there were still quite a few conservative factions among them. Some people were lying low, preparing to fight with all their might on the last day. However, there were also people who wanted to play it safe and settle things first. In addition, Xiao Yang's current situation was too terrible. It was inevitable that some people would want to fight a strong battle. Xiao Yang also nodded slightly. Waiting until the last day to make a move was indeed a very good idea. If he was still in peak condition, Xiao Yang was confident that he could continue to be strong. However, the current situation was too terrible, so he had no choice but to pay attention and be careful. After all, the slightest carelessness could lead to eternal damnation. With Zi Ying's and my strength, as long as we don't encounter a large team, we can still fight, Yang Sun said. Xiao Yang also nodded slightly. He also knew the knack of doing this. Although he still felt helpless in his heart, he had no choice but to do so. However, they naturally could not hand over the Divine Fire Badges that they had obtained so easily. If they had them, there was no need for them to be in a hurry. There was no need for them to stake everything on a single throw. They only needed to defend. That would be enough. After discussing for a while, the two of them came to a conclusion. They were prepared to return the way they had come, because there were very few cultivators on this path, so the chances of encountering them were very low. Moreover, the large teams had all landed in the center. They wanted to obtain more Divine Fire Badges, so they might still be in a stalemate right now. As a result, there were naturally fewer cultivators in the corners, so the chances of encountering them were not very high. During this period of time, they needed to avoid fighting. Xiao Yang's condition was just too terrible. In other words, whether they were going all out or defending with all their might, the outcome would be revealed on the last day of the test. The cultivators who didn't have the Divine Fire Medallion would also display their final craziness on this day and fight for everything they could obtain with all their might. On their way back, Xiaoyang and the others did not encounter any cultivators, which made them feel somewhat lucky. As time slowly passed, Xiaoyang's condition gradually recovered. However, Xiaoyang felt that this was only a superficial recovery. In reality, whether or not he could endure the tempering of an intense battle was a completely different matter. It was hard to say if he had not fought with all his might or tried. However, Xiaoyang reckoned that he could still fight. It was just that if the battle was too intense, he would not be able to withstand it. The past few days were not completely peaceful because there were also some small teams that would occupy the corners and wait for the opportunity to come. Some would wait until the time was up before approaching the center to try their luck. The two Divine Fire Badges were very tempting to these small teams. Some of them were wiser and knew their limits in the face of Yang Sen and Zi Ying's powerful pressure. They were prepared to remain dormant. Some people could not wait, but they were all small teams. In the face of Yang Sun and Ziying's attacks, they could not resist at all. Occasionally, Xiaoyang would secretly take action and use the convenience of Tianqi Mountain to suppress them. Therefore, it became very easy. Although they had fought several times, they were scared but not in danger. They easily defended the divine fire badges. From these few battles, Xiaoyang also discovered that the strength of this little girl, Ziying, was really not simple. Although Ziying's battle looked very immature, obviously because she rarely fought, her tyrannical strength perfectly made up for this. It could be said that Ziying's strength was stronger than Yang Sun. If it were not for the lack of combat experience, Yang Sun would not be her opponent. Now it seemed that Ziying's insistence on going with them was not unreasonable. A few days later, Xiaoyang had also completely stabilized his sea of consciousness. There were only 3 days left before the end of the assessment. It could be said that this round of assessment had entered the white-hot stage. In these last 3 days, the battle would gradually heat up. Even on the last day, it would completely erupt and a storm would gather. Xiaoyang got up and said, "It's almost time. Let's also start to move closer to the center."